Hello, friends, and welcome back to an unexpected podcast. We are here to continue our multi-episode Articon coverage. We have all come back recently from Articon. We had a great time, and there are a million games to go through. So we've already done an episode covering day one of the Masters. We've done one covering day two of the Masters, the doubles, and then we did one for the Masters qualifier as well. Like I said, there's a lot of games to go through. But today, what we're going to cover is the main event, the Team World GT. We're going to split this over 2 episodes because the entire team participated. So we're going to take some time to kind of refresh people on our lists and go through how our games went. I'm joined by Mick, somewhere in the world, I think maybe France, and Evan back in Boston, I believe. I'm Rob here in DC. And let's get right to it. So the GT. Mick, do you want to get started here and kind of give us a quick refresher on what your list was, and then we can launch right into the games?
All right, so the main event, the GT, it was going to be played 6 rounds and 650 points, single army. We would have six games with pool scenarios. So every round there would be a pool, and then one of the scenarios would be drawn from the pool. So we wouldn't be repeating pools. And there were 3 oaths in the tournament. Basically, at the beginning of every round, each player rolled a dice. They vetoed one of the oaths from the other from their opponent, and then they picked one of them to select in secret for that game. Just to give you a quick rundown, the oaths were basically one of them was called the Master Tactician, I believe, where you place an additional objective on the table. And if at the end of the game you had at least 3 times as many models within 6 inches of the objective, then you gain the oath. Then another one was to do with your leader killing an enemy hero. And the third one was with you killing the second most expensive hero in your opponent's army who was not the leader.
So was it hero again, or model?
Model even.
I think it might have been model. So if it happened to be like a troll or something, it could technically be that.
Yeah, right. And so you were able to veto one of your opponent's oaths. So if, let's say, your second most expensive model was something that was very likely to die, then you would usually veto that. Or if you didn't have very many numbers, you would usually veto the one with the additional objective. So essentially, because of how many players there are at this tournament, normally you would require like 7 or 8 or like 9 rounds to actually get like one person on 6 wins out of everybody. But James decided a few years ago to start doing oaths, and so this year I think has had the best system so far. That was like the most balanced. And there were a few to choose from, but like they were all quite consequential. And essentially, you scored 5 points for a win, and then you were able to score 1 extra tournament point for the oath. So if you were to score 5 wins and 5 oaths, then it was like equivalent of 6 wins. So in the end, the oaths were actually quite important for your tournament progress. So anyway, with all that in mind, we had 650 point lists. So Rob, do you want to talk about your list first?
Yeah, sure. I would love to. So I ended up taking a Minas Tirith list, pure Gondor. And I had as my leader Faramir, captain of the White Tower, with all of his regular gear and the flag. So on a horse with a shield. He was leading.
Lance. Wait, there was no lance in there.
You can't take the lance if you take the banner.
Oh.
Yeah.
But you had the banner. Okay, good.
But I had the banner.
Yeah. You see, the trick, Rob, is to take the lance instead of the banner because it's better.
You know, I ran into a bannerless lance full Boromir actually at the event. But you know, it's just really hard to give up that fight 7 and that fight 5 on your battle line. So I went with the banner. I even managed to get it a little bit painted at the end. So I usually play it as just like a white battle flag, but I scrawled a really ugly tree onto it before Articon to make it official. So, and then he was leading 4 warriors of Minas Tirith, 4 guards of the Fountain Court with shields, 2 rangers, and a knight with a shield. So yeah, 4, 4, 2, and 1. And then for my second warband, I had Faramir, captain of Ithilien, and he had his full kit as well. So he had horse, shield, heavy armor, lance, leading 3 warriors and ministers with shield, 3 warriors or 3 guards of the fountain court with shield, 2 rangers, and a knight. And then for my final warband, I had Madril. He's also leading 3 warriors with shield, 3 fountain guard with shield. He had 1 ranger, and then he had a citadel guard with a bow on a horse. And so that was a total of 31 models, 12 might, and you know, pretty standard ministerial list. Honestly, at 650, there wasn't too anything too fancy or tricksy about it. Before you ask, the first thing everyone will ask is, really,
I was about to
Faramir?
ask.
Yeah.
Really, Faramir?
And the answer
Why did you pick Faramir,
is
bro?
yes, Faramir. And how did we get to this sad state of affairs? So basically, early on, I was planning to play Army of Dale. That was the army that I was going to play at Articon. I was practicing with it. I was painting it. And then fairly late into the game, I found out, if I could make a shameless plug for a moment, that I had an article coming out in SBG magazine that I wrote about Boromir. So in this article, which obviously was written some time ago, it was just now releasing, I had mentioned how I'd never been to a competitive event without Boromir. And I thought it would be pretty ironic if the day it actually releases, I come to a tournament without Boromir. So I made a last minute switch to Gondor, but by this time we had already determined our lists. And as you will find out shortly, Mick had already claimed Hurin. So, you know, fair game. He claimed him well in advance. I would have, in an ideal world, taken Hurin over Faramir, but he wasn't an option. And Mick's list was really good, and it functioned exactly the way he wanted. So I stuck with the lesser brother, and we will find out throughout the course of the episode whether or not he did show his quality. Spoiler alert, not really. Yeah, so that was my list. If any of you out there are not reading SPG magazine in general, you should. It's a wonderful product put out by Damien and Tom, wonderful people in the community. So definitely give that a look. And yeah, and so that was my list for the GT.
This latest issue of SBG magazine also features some really incredible terrain pieces. So yeah, you should definitely check it out.
Yeah. It's a great fanzine, and it's anybody who likes the game, it's really worth picking up. So, man, Mick,
yeah, so
you had an article in the last one, didn't you, in issue 11?
Yeah,
you did.
I think I had one article in issue 8 and one in 11, or 9 and 11.
Yeah, so Mick is a veteran of the magazine. So.
I think you have maybe 3 now at this point.
Me?
You've written a couple.
No, I've written 2. Yeah.
In any case,
I'll
Mick is the pioneer for us in the SPG magazine space, and we're slowly getting our contributions in there. But yeah. So I couldn't very well write an article.
SPG magazine will be just entirely unexpected podcast members.
An unexpected SPG magazine. Yeah, but I couldn't very well write a article about how much I love Boromir and a tactic on Boromir and then show up without Boromir. So that made my decision at the last minute very easy. But luckily, it's an army that I'm very familiar with. So even though it wasn't what I would consider like the best army I could have written for Articon, at least I knew how to play it very well with little practice. So
like I have a feeling that you were a bit of a Denethor there.
Yeah,
telling your Faramir that you wish he had been here in.
I wish that.
Very much. Okay, so
well, we'll talk more about Faramir, I think, later in the episode. But he gets a bad rap, but he's okay. But Hurin's better.
I'll just explain why. So essentially, the main event at Articon, if you go as part of the team, and most people do, we went as part of the 4-person team. So it was Matt, Evan, myself, and Rob. So if you go as part of a team, you are limited to 1 named character per team. So you're not able to take 5 Galadriels or 5 Witch Kings. So initially, I was planning on taking an evil list with the Witch King, but then Evan claimed the Witch King. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to take someone else. So I decided to claim Hurin, which then Rob couldn't play him.
It all worked out at the end, though. So
this is how it goes. Everything worked out fine.
Yeah.
So my list was, I call it the Mix, aka the Battle of Ardacon Fields, as in the theme, because there is no theme in this. It starts with Legolas mounted on a horse, from the Halls of Thranduil. He leads 8 elves with shields and 5 elves with bows, one of whom has an elven glaive as a spear. Then my second warband is from Minas Tirith, so that's here in the tall mounted with 8 warriors of Minas Tirith with shields and spears and 5 Rangers of Gondor, 4 of which had spears. And my third warband was Theodred, mounted again with a shield, 2 Riders of Rohan with throwing spears, 3 Warriors of Rohan with bows, and 6 Warriors of Rohan with shields and throwing spears. So essentially my list was 40 models, 15 bows plus Legolas, and I also had 8 throwing spears. So it relied heavily on basically hoping to play against armies with lower defense, maybe higher numbers, and shoot them down as much as I could. Because my thinking generally was there will be less Galadriels because she's no longer such a heavily used model. There will be less possibility of Shadow Lords because there's 1 per team. There will be less possibility of Cyrdauns because there's 1 per team. So whereas in the Masters I was running into Cyrdauns and being unable to do anything, in this tournament I was able to actually shoot, and that was fun. I was able to actually use my army. Yeah. So 40 models. So yeah, let's go into your first game, Rob.
Yeah, you went wide. I kind of went tall. So I went with the idea
you
that
didn't go with Hurin, did you?
I didn't go with her in
Not
the tall.
her in the tall.
I went with Faramir, the average, but
I think had we actually sat down and discussed it, it would have made sense to take Faramir just because Hurin didn't really have any bonuses for my army anyway. And then you could have used Hurin because he would actually grant you many bonuses.
Bonuses,
well, especially the one main bonus that he has, which is the fact that you can just send in Boromir, let him die, and not lose your.
And let me tell you that that very fact, because I'm used to playing Boromir and Hurin, so I'm used to being aggressive with Boromir, knowing that if things go horribly wrong, I'm okay. I did that a couple times, and then I was like, "Oh crap, that's not Hurin, that's Faramir."
Yeah. So actually, to be fair, I should have maybe offered.
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, it was fun to try him out. So Faramir has some bonuses. He has a shield, so like when you need to, he can shield with multiple attacks, and he's a little bit better into D6 because of the lance. So he wasn't a complete tragedy. He's got a little bit more will and fate, so he's ever so slightly more durable. And that's the weird thing about Faramir is that on paper, he's a great model, but somehow in game he just never brings it. I don't know what it is. It's just like the curse of Faramir. So comparable to Hurin in every possible metric, except that on the table Hurin just seems to perform so much better for me every time.
Except at the times when Hurin fights against Forlong Fat.
Well, I mean, but that's Forlong the Fat. Come on.
We shall not mention that one again.
Yeah. And that was Mick piloting Hurin, so.
But so the philosophy for my list was, I had a fairly durable center, D6 S/D7 with fight 5. I had a little bit of bow fire. I knew I wasn't going to win any shooting wars, so it was mostly to like threaten horses and things like that. And then I knew that Boromir himself would be a target unless there was a second threat on the table, right? So Madril was kind of a flex character. He's there for Maelstrom. He's got March. He's got a lot of might. But if you don't have 2 mounted heroes that are going in, then your opponent can very easily neutralize 1 mounted hero, right? So anyway, so game 1, right? That's what we're talking about.
Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before you go into game 1, because this is important, sort of formation wise. Did your warriors of Minas Tirith have shields or spears and shields?
They had shields and were in front of the Fountain Court. Yeah.
Interesting. So, what was the philosophy behind that?
There really wasn't a philosophy. There was, man, I really need to write this list and I can't take all Fountain Court, which is my usual go-to. And that really sucks. But I mean, here's the thing, like your front rank is going to die throughout the course of the game. It's going to get hit by all of the big heroes. All the big heroes are going to have pluses to wound. And so if you have the warriors up front, you're going to lose out on scenarios where like you have to take courage tests and stuff because obviously they don't have bodyguard. But if they're the ones that are dying early, they're not the ones that are dying late, right? And I found in the late game having the bodyguarded D7 with spears everywhere is usually a lot better. So it's like as your opponent starts to lose resources and his army starts to run out of steam with casualties and everything, your army just gets more durable. Whereas if he spends all his resources to kill the best parts of your army and then is stuck with a bunch of crappy warriors, he's not too afraid of it, right? Not to mention, like, if you're on objectives and you need, and you're broken and you start having to take tests and that kind of thing. So the warriors in front, do nominally get D7 for shield wall sometimes if your opponent doesn't know how to target correctly. But at Articon, that never came into play because everyone who goes to Articon knows how to target your warriors correctly. So I just kind of assumed that they would be the D6 wall and that they would die the way D6 dies, but that, the army would get tougher as you kill through it. And then I have a lot of might, usually more might than my opponent, because 12 is kind of a lot for 650. They're usually somewhere between 8 and 9. And so as their resources shift outward, I start to kind of get more of an advantage and keep the momentum, at least in theory, right? In practice, I would, most games I was like, why didn't I just take all Fountain Court? I should have just dropped 2 models and taken all Fountain Court. What are you thinking? You're an idiot. Like, all Fountain Court is always superior. But yeah, so that was the basic philosophy, was just I needed a few more bodies because 650 gets tight. Warriors are cheaper, and I kind of would rather have them up front and let them be the first line, especially because they're going to be fight 5 in the battle line with the Fountain Court behind them. It also kind of extends how far you can put Boromir's banner, because he only needs to reach the 2nd rank. He doesn't need to reach the front rank necessarily, which sometimes does come into play. So generally, that's the thinking. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Play all Fountain Court, it's better.
I just feel like if you just played all Fountain Court, and you just don't have any issues of like, oh well, I have to think of a way to maybe not lose too many models, or what if I don't have bodyguard later on? You do.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is usually I play all Fountain Court, and in this time I was like, oh, but if I went with the all Fountain Court, I would probably only have like 28 models. That seems really low for 650. I should probably downgrade some to warriors, get a few extra bodies in there. And, with the benefit of hindsight, I never missed the extra bodies, but I certainly missed bodyguard and defense 7. So, but I think it's kind of like tomatoes at the end of the day. I'm not sure that it ever, except for maybe the absolute last game where it would have been crucial for reasons we'll get to later in the podcast. I don't think there was ever a time where it really super cost me a game. Like, there were times it was annoying where, a warrior would run away, or, he'd be killed on a 5 when a 6 would have been needed for a Fountain Court. But it certainly wasn't, the determinative thing that, made or broke my tournament results kind of thing. So that's a very long way to answer that question that I said I didn't really put much thinking into, but apparently I did, just subconsciously.
Apparently you did, yeah.
unless this is
either that, or
right
you're just coping.
Well, I think it's one of those things, when you play an army so long that you just don't think about it anymore. You just, in the back of your head, you already know what it does, and so you go through the entire decision-making process so fast that you don't really think about what you thought about. That's kind of where I am with Minas Tirith. That's just, I play the army so often that those are all the considerations I would have had, but I never really actively considered them. It just kind of automatically I wrote the army, right? The big thing for me was always how many cav, how many bows, but yeah. So shall we go to round 1?
All right, round 1.
Round 1. All right. So
actually, one thing. No. At this point, let's get on to the games.
Let's get on to the games.
Just so you know, we haven't talked about Evan's list, because Evan's list and tournament report is going to be in the next episode. So
yes,
tune into the next episode.
So Evan is our designated heckler. Yes.
Yeah.
He's here to mock. He's here to mock our inadequacies. So, of which strap in. You're about to see many.
Would ask.
All right, let me pull up. I'm going on tourney here to kind of refresh myself. Yeah. Okay. Yep. So round 1, the scenario was domination. Okay, great. And I started. So at this Articon, the top 12 tables or something like that were on like a higher area. Where all of the 1%ers got to play.
Area.
And that was an area. So if you weren't there, Articon was like playing games inside of an active oven. It was just baking hot. But the VIP area had like dedicated fans. So I got to start my tournament up in the VIP area, I assume by random draw. And I knew that was horrible, because I would have flown too close to the sun and know what I was missing when I plummeted back down with
Actually,
the plebs.
to be fair, the sun was down there. So
yeah, that's true. But yeah, so it was up on
Actually, the sun was in the main
up
room.
on the mezzanine. The scenario ended up being domination, so an objective scenario, neither particularly good nor bad for me. And my opponent was Michael van Bylen. I believe he was from Belgium, we discussed, a very, very nice guy. And he was essentially playing a mirror match to mine, more or less. So he also had Gondor, but he went with King Elisar on armored horse with 8 warriors, 2 knights, and 8 fountain guard. Then he had Hurin the Tall on horse. Good for you, right choice. With 4 warriors and 4 citadel guard. And then his third warband was a Avenger bolt thrower with swift reload. So when we got to the table, it was like a Minas Tirith Ruins themed table where you had a completely open center and then like 4 of the like Minas Tirith Ruins kind of at an angle around it, and then there might have been some forest or something in the corner, but it was mostly just like this wide open plaza flanked by a couple buildings. And I looked at that and I was like, this is miserable for me. Like his army is mine, but better at killing mine, right? Because he's got Andoril, which just goes through, doesn't matter if you're Fountain Court or Warriors, like it goes through you. He's got Hurin with his +1 to wound. And then he's got the Bolt Thrower, which is just going to like light me to pieces, right? And it's domination, so I have to go to the center to get the objective. Like I can't like try to avoid him or something. We just have to fight it out. And so our objectives got placed in kind of like a classic X shape, right? You had 1 in the middle. He put 2 behind like the ruins. I put 2 behind the ruins. Nothing tricky about flipping the table. We knew we were just going to have a pretty straight up like battle line fight. And then he deployed his bolt thrower on one of the buildings overlooking the battlefield within like 12 inches of the center, and I'm like, oh, this sucks. Whoa. Right? Like I can't avoid it. I can't get to it. If I don't, I have to roll a 6 to charge it because it's right up on the edge, right? So like this thing is just going to sit there, shoot off my spears, kill all my heroes. Like this is going to be miserable. But like
when people do that.
Well, I mean, but it's the right call, right? Like he made the right play. I would have done the same thing, but I was like, oh well, this is going to be a great start. That's going to be an 0-12 loss right there. But it actually ended up going pretty well. So I put my army deployed fairly standard. Like I deployed kind of up towards the objective with my battle line. I had Boromir flanked by like 3 in the ways of knights just to make sure the bolt thrower doesn't kill him immediately. And I put my rangers, most of them up onto the ruins themselves. So they kind of had like a nice vantage point to shoot from as well. And then the objectives were kind of underneath the ruins. So they were also contesting the objective, which, you know, would be gate for later turns. He won the first priority. Movement was pretty much what you would expect. I shuffled forward because I was like, well, I have to get into a fight with you. There's no use in like, you know, sitting around and waiting for you to come to me or something. He kind of shuffled his battle line a little. And then the first shooting phase comes. I'm like, great, here it comes. Rolls his swift rerolled, 6 shots. Awesome. First shot, hits, goes through first in the way, goes through second in the way, goes through third in the way, horse or rider, wounds Boromir. I'm like, and there's 5 more of these to come, right? Roll my fate, fails the fate. I was like, oh my God, roll my fate. Okay, I passed the fate. So I've got Boromir already on 1 fate with the first shot of the bolt thrower. And I was like, well, this is gonna be interesting. Like, I don't know how I'm gonna stop this. But by some small mercy, like all the rest of his 5 shots, I think 3 or 4 of them hit. Some of them got through the in the ways. None of them ended up wounding Boromir. Like he just failed to wound on the rest of them. And one of them, I think, like dehorsed a knight. It didn't kill him, it just dehorsed him. So like, given what it could have been based on how it started, it actually turned out really okay for me, right? Like Boromir didn't actually take a wound, which matters because that's a scenario point, right? Wounding leader. He still had his horse. Everybody else that needed to had their horse, and I wasn't like mauled. And then here comes the miracle, right? So it goes to my shooting phase, and I'm like, well, I'm just gonna shoot you back. Like I don't expect much. And then my like 5 plucky rangers within the ways for the building in kill all of the crew. They just like showed up, and they're like, I'm like, I'm gonna shoot the crew. I might as well get rid of them. Like I can't have this thing shooting my butt all game. And they're just like, yeah, you got it, boss. And they're just like, hit, made the end away, like kills the crew. Hit, made the end away, kills the crew. I felt so bad, right? Because it was like, oh, this is the first shooting phase, and like I've mauled his bolt thrower, and
Wait,
that
wait,
was.
you feel bad after
I
after
feel
what he
bad.
did to
Like that
you.
shouldn't happen, right? Like that's like just luck of the dice, right? Like
Yeah,
5
but his bolt
rangers,
thrower
right?
already did way more than average, would
Well,
suggest.
I mean, true, right? But so like that was my lifeline. Once that thing was basically offline, I was like, okay, now I can actually play a game because this
So
thing isn't
the
just
game
going to
the
be.
game was going badly until you pulled out the loaded dice, is what you're saying.
Exactly. So I the thing that they didn't realize, it was so hot in that room that I could just leave them sitting on the table, and it was like a microwave, right? So but yeah, so and then after that it just became kind of a battle line slog, right? Where I rushed into his lines. Boromir had initially jumped kind of underneath the ruin just in case. And he had spread out. Elisar was kind of trapped behind his lines a little bit because I was able to rush him so quickly that he wasn't able to create very good openings, right? And I kind of like flanked around. So all Elisar could really do all game was like go into a warrior, combat off of him into maybe another warrior, or like come back to be a banner. But I was able to kind of keep him from just like rolling into a flank and going through my lines. And because of the fight 5 down the battle line, most of my fights I was, even if I wasn't killing, I was winning, right? Because I was just pushing him off, and I kept pushing closer towards his objectives. Eventually I created a gap for Boromir, and he just went in and started killing warriors. He had Hurin kind of coming around the flank, and so I sent Faramir to go play with Hurin. And my oath that I'd selected was kill the most expensive model that's not your leader, which was Hurin. So I knew I needed to kill him anyway, and I figured go show your quality, Faramir. And just throughout the normal course of the game, eventually like he got bogged down because I was getting the numerical advantage, and I managed to surround Hurin and kill him. um, and that was basically the game. In the end, Faramir, who was able to keep his horse, was able to like go around and claim one objective. I was pushing on one flank, and so I got enough warriors to go over and claim the other one. I still had my rangers sitting on my 2, so I ended up getting all of the objectives. And Boromir didn't get hurt after the initial, butt pucker moment of getting hit by the bolt thrower. Elisar was fine. I dehorsed him at some point, but he didn't get hurt either, which I didn't expect to. And yeah, and it was a fairly standard slog after that point. So, and I just, because of the fight 5 and the banner everywhere, I was just kind of winning the attrition war more than anything. And once Elisar was off his horse, if I won priority, I'll send a guy into you or block you off. So he was never able to really get traction with him. And I ended up winning the game. I don't remember the points, but it was a pretty sizable victory, like 8-2 or something like that, plus oath. So what looked on paper to be a pretty hard like uphill climb turned out pretty well for me, and it was a good start to the tournament. My opponent was a really nice guy. He played a good game. The luck went against him at the wrong moments, and at that point it was kind of an uphill fight for him, but he was a good spirit about all of it. There was even a moment where like I was about to make a really stupid move, and he's like, no, don't do that, like move your guy here. And so he was a really good guy, and thank you for the game, my friend. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, and so I started on a high note. So
Nice. In a Minas Tirith civil war.
a Minas Tirith civil war.
Defeats Hurin.
Yeah.
And shows his worth.
So Faramir eventually got Hurin because like Hurin went into a combat, and I think I won it because he didn't strike, but I have fight 5 and I won the roll off and I killed his horse, and then Faramir went into him, and I think he was out of might. He might have struck up just to like guarantee it, but by that point he was surrounded, so there was really no hope of him living through it. So
yeah.
Yeah,
Very
I mean,
nice.
I think you did a good job of neutralizing the 2 big threats, which were, one, the bolt thrower, which obviously
Yeah,
you
good
got
job.
a bit
Well
lucky
skilled
on
there.
that. All
oh, I
skill there.
definitely got lucky there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Better lucky than good, as
Aragorn
they say, right?
Yeah.
Aragorn was going to be sort of what kept him in the game, because obviously your battle line beats his battle line in a fight because you've got the banner of Minas Tirith. But being able to prevent Aragorn from doing a bunch of damage,
Yeah, and
I think probably won you the game.
I've suffered in that mirror match before where Aragorn would just like go into the fountain court and kill like 4 a turn and just like go through me because of Anduril. So none of my advantages mattered. So I've kind of just become good at neutralizing Elisar, and I think being able to kind of trap him behind his battle line a little bit and never really let him get good traction, because I had like one flank covered and the other flank covered, so he never really had a good position. The bolt thrower was obviously just fluke. That was pure luck. But my plan there was because it was up high on the ruin, it couldn't actually see directly downward, right? Like there was a angle at which it could see. And so running everything essentially underneath that ruin, that's important, so that he couldn't shoot the important stuff. Sure, he'd be able to pick off like isolated archers and whatever, but at least he couldn't really get into like the meat of my army. That was the plan, which obviously didn't necessarily need to happen at the end because the bolt thrower was neutralized by my sniper rangers. But that was the idea, was that at least I wouldn't give him good shots, and the bolt thrower wasn't on an objective. So if I ignored it but didn't let it get too many good kills, I could at least kind of, you know, not let it dominate the game. But it didn't matter.
Did you think about
it.
possibly like sending your guys to take control of the bolt thrower and start shooting at him?
So I never really thought about it because I didn't know if you could do it, and because
So I think that was FAQ'd actually, where you can't do that. Because I know my father did that a couple of times.
They're warriors, like clearly they should be able to.
Well, they should be able to, but I didn't think of it anyway, because by that point, like I was just trying to play my game, right, and not be tricky, and just let my army do what it does, which is shove a bunch of fight 5 guys at you that every so often kill something, while the 2 big heroes are the ones who actually kill models. So Madrill was a standout, you know, like he just kind of sat halfway between the objective and the battle line, calling the moves and, you know, plugging the flank, because him and a couple warriors could always, if he got through with a knight or something, they could jump on him safely without worrying about it. So Madrill was awesome. I never regret taking him. Like he always does outstandingly for me, even in non-Maelstrom missions. But yeah, started with luck and ended with pretty standard kind of fight that went my direction. So
yeah, great. You know, Madrill is always a standout because you just have all those might points, but you're not gonna use them anywhere else other than for a heroic move.
He moves and he marches, and that's all he needs to do. And then occasionally like a cheeky combat if it's a really favorable fight. But yeah. But he's great for his cost. Absolutely wonderful. And you know what? He has a bow with might behind it, and that wasn't irrelevant either. So
he's got
and he has woodland creature. That's the other thing. People always forget he has woodland creature. And so like occasionally he'd like run through a wood and catch somebody unawares, or I'd have to remind them, be like, I know you're positioning there, but you do remember Madrill has woodland creature, right? And they'd be like, oh yeah, no, I'm going to take that back. So he was really good at just being annoying the entire tournament.
Nice. Cool. So moving on to my game. I love domination. It's one of my favorite scenarios, except when you have to play against an army that is huge or bigger than yours. So I got put up against David Messenger, who was playing an army of Lake Town with an allied Bilbo. So he had 56 models. The list general was Master of Lake Town, leading 14 warriors. Then there was Bard with his kids, leading 13 warriors. Alfred leading 11 warriors. Braga leading 11 warriors, and Bilbo with Sting in the Ring. So 56. So naturally, it's one of those things of like, oh, I really wanted to like have a nice game against the hordes that I can shoot them down, but now there's a horde that takes up all the objectives and just runs me over. From the very beginning, I was thinking, okay, as long as I don't lose like 10-0 or something like that, then it's a win for me. So we basically set up both battle lines set up in the middle. And like pretty much 2 minutes after I finished setting up, I realized I actually picked the wrong side, because I didn't think about picking a side that was like a east-west sort of situation. I was only looking at north-south, and I realized had I picked an east-west, the game would have been much more in my favor. But anyway, so the game sort of started with both of our battle lines very close to each other, and I managed to sort of plug holes in between buildings where I was really able to stop his numerical advantage from making much of an advantage. So he had like a bunch of archers. I think it was like all his 13 archers or so. They were only like able to like stand behind the wood and like go around the forest in order to like spend like 4 or 5 turns to reach one of my side objectives. So I just wanted to make sure that he won't be able to do very much with those numbers. And I put my Theodred in the front rank. Then I put my Legolas and Huron in the back rank. But I was thinking, if I manage to get a heroic move off in the first turn or priority or anything doesn't call a move, then I'm actually gonna move my warriors aside and just charge in with Legolas and Huron as well. So it just happened that on the first turn I won a heroic move roll off against Braga. I think his Braga's might point was free, and I spent my point. Erkenbrand got into some warriors. Some of my other warriors got into Bard, who was mounted also in the front rank, very close to Theodred. Yeah, and then I basically charged in with my Legolas and Huron. So the idea was to cut down as much as you can from early on. So I got lucky in the first turn in that my opponent only rolled a 4 for Bard, fighting against 2 warriors supported. So I was able to get him to burn 2 points of might to win a fight.
Nice.
Otherwise, he would have lost his horse. So that was a major thing for me at the start, because that really slowed him down from killing throughout the game. Theodred, Legolas, Huron really started cutting things down. So despite the fact that my opponent had his banner and from Master, I was like really able to like start taking advantage in the middle throughout the first few turns. And Bilbo was always going to be annoying, but I basically like positioned all of my stuff in a way that whenever one of my heroes would charge into combat, I would always put multiple models around him, just so Bilbo could never get in. So that was ensuring that I was actually able to win fights against all that stuff. So yeah, surprisingly from the very start, the game started going my way quite far. Then on like the third turn, I think Alfred decided to give all of his will points to give 3 might to the Master, because Master had already used 2 might points on the banner, and Alfred rolled a 111.
Oh,
So Alfred kept all his might points, and the banner was no more.
oh, Alfred,
Right?
you.
Especially since that happens like
Did Alfred spend these 3 might points?
Oh,
I have to tell you, later on, Alfred was actually getting into combat, calling heroic moves, and he even called it heroic combat in one instance.
oh.
Like he was trying to kill an elf with like another 2 guys, but the elf actually managed to win combat because he was shielding. So in the end, Alfred's inability to do anything was really useless. But yeah, the 111 really helped in my troops being able to outfight him with my fight 5, and he was only defense 4. Yeah, so that helped. So once Legolas and Huron broke through the middle, I managed to also engage his Master of Lakedown. So there was this weird situation where I was fighting with 2 guys against Master, and Master was supported by a spearman. But the way that the spearman was standing was that if I sent a 3rd guy into both the spearman and the Master, then I was able to actually trap the Master had the spearman been able to. I mean, if my guys wins combat, then he stands there. Spearman gets pushed away, and then the Master, should he lose the combat, he ends up being trapped. So my opponent saw that, and obviously fought I used his priority to fight against my 1 elf who was fighting against his spearman. I shielded in order to win the fight. I won, and then Master fighting against two guys, lost combat, and trapped, died in that 1 combat.
Woo.
So that was quite lucky for me too.
Mm-hmm.
So everything was really going my way, and I managed to set up the situation where I was like taking my time to really like count points for everything, for every objective. I actually managed to get a model within 3 inches of every single objective. And I figured that let's say I was able to control the middle objective. I had one on my bottom right flank. I had the one in the bottom in the top right flank for just having more models on it. Then I had a guy on the top left, and I had Theodred in the bottom left. So I was like, I sort of figured this situation where after the general point and after the breaking point, I think I was on like 7-2. and the time runs out, and I pass the turn to my opponent, and just before I did, I counted everything. I figured, even if everything goes wrong, even if I break, lose the guy in the top left, lose Theodred in the bottom left, and he basically does everything right, I cannot lose this game. The worst possible score is a 6-5 to me. So I pass the turn. There's no more time on the clock. I'm like relieved that I've won it, regardless what happens. He starts doing his courage test, and then he picks up a guy that I didn't see that was hiding behind a tent. He takes a courage test. He moves in within 3 inches of my top right objective, and he makes the number of models on that objective as a 2-2, so it's a tie. So then after that, everything goes right for him. So he kills my Theodred, he kills my one guy on the other objective. I believe he breaks me as well, and so it ended up being a 5-5 final score. Only because I did not see this one guy. It was this annoying situation where I had one of my elves, and I was like, there's nothing here to do. Maybe I'll just move him here to the side. There's nothing for me to do with this guy. And he had literally been standing next to that guy. But I just didn't see that there was someone standing behind the tent. And then he moves on, and the game ends 5-5.
That's a heartbreak. Yeah, that's a heartbreak. He kept you blind to all else that moves, right?
Yeah, but it was just going so well for the entire game. I was like, wow, I'm actually managing to take this, and I'm winning this, and I'm gonna win it. This is such a miraculous win. And then, oh shit. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I'm gonna draw, unfortunately. But it was a really good game, and I managed to get Bilbo to do basically pretty much nothing for the entire game, and he was one of the big threats, especially with such high numbers. So I was in the end quite satisfied with how I played. It was just one mistake essentially that kind of cost.
Well, and you know what, that happens sometimes, right? You can play a more or less perfect game and still lose or draw if just something doesn't go your way, right? That's just how it goes. So
yeah, or like in this case, it's not that something didn't go my way. It was already 2 hours of a very intensive game, and then I just missed the model.
Yeah.
And so that happens. Sometimes something stands behind a tree, behind the ruin. You just don't look. And then that changes the course of the game.
Well, and that's something to remember. Like, it's hot in the room. You've already been playing for several days, right? You're tired because it's a mentally challenging game. Like this kind of stuff happens, right? Your endurance runs out at some point. So.
Oh yeah, that was like game 11 of my. Well, actually, game 13 if we count friendlies. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Of the last 4 days.
Yeah. So it happens.
Yeah.
All we can do is try and make as few mistakes as possible, and sometimes things slip through the cracks. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Should we move on to your second game, Rob?
My second game. So of all the games, I think this one's going to haunt me forever the most. I had won the first game fairly convincingly on points, so I got to stay up in the nice air-conditioned area, and I dared to dream for ever so slight of a moment. Scenario 2 was Reconnoiter, which is, again, it's not a scenario that's particularly good or bad for me necessarily. It just depends on what I fight against. If I fight against an army like you had, Mick, that's pretty bad for me. As it turns out, I fought another mirror match. So it was another Gondor army.
Did he have a Huron?
He did not have a Huron. He had something worse than a Huron. So despite the fact that this was a Minas Tirith army nominally, the first model was Gwaihir, who was also the leader. The second model was Boromir of the White Tower, a horse, shield, and lance, with 7 warriors with shield, 2 with shield and spear, 5 rangers, and then a guy with a banner. And then his third warband was Irolas with 6 warriors with a shield, 2 warriors with a shield and spear, and 4 rangers. So on the numbers, we were just about equal on numbers, except he had a good deal more bows than I did, and most crucially, he had a really angry eagle with 3 might and a Boromir with 6 might and a lance. And so, kind of like the last game, I was like, oh god, I'm hosed, right? Because we essentially have the same battle line, except your heroes are way better than my heroes, and they're going to chew through my battle line easily. You've got a big flying monster who's going to, hurl through everything, and then in a pinch, if you need to, he can fly off, and there's basically nothing I can do to stop him. And I was looking at it, and I was like, well, okay, I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to do my best. The table I was playing on, ironically, was exactly the same table, so I didn't even have to move. So as I said, it was like a big wide open center, and then like each corner had like a ruin in it, which kind of it separated the battlefield into 3 quadrants, right, or 3 like lanes. So it became very clear immediately that we were going to be fighting in the 3 lanes. And for me, looking at the game was like, okay, so you're going to break me. I'm probably not going to break you because my heroes are going to be too busy dealing with your heroes, and your heroes are just faster, better at doing that. My job is to just contain Gwaihir and Boromir and try to get people off the board, because I think that if I am keeping your heroes contained, I could probably start to win some of those like side fights. And I had a good defense, so I could probably weather the bow fire fairly easily. I had Madril that could go down one side and like march forward. And that was kind of the general idea, but I didn't have a lot of hopes for the game, because I thought, honestly, all he had to do was fly in Gwaihir, hurrah combat off of me, take him off the board for all he cares, and then just hold me in place with his numerically superior army, right?
How many models again?
He was at 30 and I was at 31, but he did have the
Okay.
eagle, right?
Mhm.
So he shoots me down a little bit early. Boromir combats through a few troops, and then he just creates a picket line, flies off with the eagle, and there's not a lot I can do. As it turns out, he deployed everything centrally. I deployed like a little mini battle line with Boromir and Faramir in the center. I put Madril kind of off to one side because I figured he would just kind of go down the bowling lane. And then I scattered some rangers on the other side, and like I had like one knight on one side, one knight on another, and then like my other horseman was kind of, he could go either way. And it was really more about that cat and mouse game and reconnoiter, where you first kind of see where they're going to show up, so how to position. Obviously it's Maelstrom, but I had Madril, so all my stuff came on, and all his stuff, I believe, came on either within 1 turn or 2, so nothing dramatic there. And so I kind of picketed the center a little, and I started moving troops down either side just so I'd have the option. And then I had Boromir kind of in the center and Faramir next to him, so they could go either way, and Madril was going to shepherd some troops down this way. And he put everything in the center, and crucially, he put the 2 big heroes in the center, right? I think Irolas ended up deploying where Madril was, so they were going to have like a slap fight there. And so my job here was, if those 2 heroes stay together, they're just going to go through my army and just like go through it piece by piece. So I need to bait him to split them up, because I feel like I can deal with them individually. But collectively, like, they're going to be really hard to deal with, especially if they both end up jumping on like Boromir or something, right? Because if he's fighting both, he's dead. And we did the cat and mouse thing. I ended up kind of baiting him by throwing Faramir down one flank with a couple knights, and it was clear they were just going to book it up the side, so he had to start dealing with them. Madril was doing what he was going to do. He was going up the other side, and Boromir was kind of dancing around in the center, just baiting him to come at him. And he did exactly what I wanted to do. And he threw Boromir to one flank and Gwaihir to the other one. So now I'm like, okay, good. So now I can kind of keep one of the heroes entertained with Faramir, who I don't care about. And if he manages to get troops off, whatever, right? And then I've got Boromir to just play with an eagle, which isn't a great fight, but I'm fight 7. I have 6 might. Like, if he goes for Boromir, I feel like I could probably keep the eagle entertained. And then I just kept like a line in the center to keep him from being able to break through easily with the troops he had in the center. And as it so turned out, so Boromir did Boromir things, right? He went in on like a ranger and he combated off of him, but I was able to create kind of like a line of troops to make sure that Boromir had to essentially combat through them before he could get to me. And Faramir was able to just book it down the side with a knight. and he was now in actual threat range of getting that knight off the board, right? He managed to survive the bow fire. Yeah, he was proving his worth for now. He was able to survive the bow fire because luckily all of his rangers kept hitting him and not his horse, or they'd hit the knight. And it eventually came to a place where Faramir and the knight were kind of in the back ruin, and they were essentially ready to take off. And so he was kind of playing catch up to kind of get troops around them. And Boromir was basically going to be playing there all game, and he wasn't going to be able to get anything off on that side. So in the end, he didn't get his knight off. Like I lost the wrong priority, so he wasn't able to book it. And then he was able to like jump on Faramir and combat off of him eventually. But essentially half his army was tied up with Faramir at one knight and like 2 Fountain Guard or something on an entire flank. And so that meant that a lot of the numbers were, the heat was off of me there, right? The guys in the center weren't going to get through my little picket line. And so really the whole game kind of at that point focused on the flank where I had Madril, Boromir, and 2 knights and a sizable contingent against an eagle and just like a small line of warriors with a Rolas. And I was able, so the eagle was going in, he went in into the ruin itself to kill, I think he jumped on like a ranger or something, failed to kill the ranger. And then for several turns, I kept winning priority and was able to keep the eagle pinned in the corner of the board for several turns. And because of the way the ruin was, it was kind of like a corner with no windows, so he couldn't see out of it. So even if he won and combated, he couldn't charge anything because he didn't have line of sight with the eagle. And I'm like, oh goodness, this is my chance. Like, here we go. So like Boromir immediately booked it forward out of cover because I was able to, again, like start stacking models so he couldn't land anywhere. And if he wanted to land, he'd have to charge and then either barge or combat. And in the meanwhile, Boromir took his little like flanking party, broke through his little like defense area, mostly killed Irolas, and I mostly had control of that side. And my knight or my citadel guard was on the other side of that and was within 1 turn of getting off. Like all I had to do was win a priority and get him off, win a roll off and get him off. And I was like, oh my God, I actually feel pretty good about this. So at this point I'm broken because Eagle and Boromir, but Boromir is unhurt. And I'm very, very close to getting a model off the board, and that would be enough, right? And then the Mick moment started, right? Like it went from everything going my way to like suddenly everything starts turning the other way. So Gray here eventually was able to free himself, and then like start going through models. Like Boromir kept bouncing off stuff. Like I couldn't win a priority, so he would tie up the knight who wouldn't die, but like he would just tie me in that corner. And ultimately, it finally came down to a fact where it became very clear that the person who wins priority wins the game, right? It basically was that simple because I win, the knight runs off. We had to call over a judge to like confirm what getting off the board means. Like there was no ambiguity. Like I win priority, like 2 turns in a row or something like that, or a heroic move roll off. My guy's off the board. He wins priority. The eagle gets into the knight, and that's basically game because I'm broken and I can't get anyone off. And so obviously what happened was, I kept losing priority. I kept losing the move offs. The eagle finally chewed his way all the way up the flank to my 1 knight. And at that point we were at time, right? So even though I had other models that could have theoretically made it off the board, there just wasn't enough movement phases to do it, even with a march. So it all came down to like, all right, we're going to roll this, and we're going to roll. Whoever wins priority wins the game. Didn't go to me. He was able to get into the knight. He Gwayhered, he ate him, right? Like there was nothing that I was able to do. Boromir could have theoretically then gotten off the turn, off the board, because he was like within like 11 inches or something, but there wasn't enough time to get him off on just like game time. And so like at the end of the day, I was broken, he wasn't, and nobody got anything off the board. Both of our leaders took a wound at that point, and so he took it on the break. So it was heartbreaking because I felt like I played it right. I was able to neutralize or like separate the threats. I was able to pin the eagle for like most of the game, which at that point, I think if I was him, I would have just cut my losses and, like I said, flown him off and put the pressure on me to really get off. And even if I got it off at that point, he would still have me on the break, right? But yeah, it was a really good game. It was a really close game. I don't think I actually mentioned it. The player, his name was Eric Regoli from Team Italy. Really nice guy, really good player, distractingly handsome. Like he was one of those people. It was like playing against an Armani billboard. I swear to God, it was like a chiseled Roman statue standing across the table from me. And we had a really good game. Like there was moments where it got like really tense, not in like a unfriendly way, but it was like, can I move there? Like if I can sneak through there, that guy gets off, and will we'll go this way, that way. And it was really close in the end. Unfortunately, my plan stopped working towards the end of the game, and I was not able to get anyone off, even though like I was within striking distance like 3 or 4 times, and he took a hard fought game, so that put me on a win and a loss. But I'm actually I was fairly proud of how I played. I don't think I made any major mistakes. Like there's nothing I look back on and think, you shouldn't have done that. That would have, you could have won the game if you didn't do that. Using Faramir as bait, how very Denethor of me, ended up being the right play, because it meant that Boromir spent the entire game killing Faramir and not doing anything else, right? Gwei here, I was able to kind of neutralize. Yes, there was some luck there, but trapping him in a corner without line of sight gave me the time I needed. And sometimes the dice just don't go your way. That's just the game, right? So that was my game too.
Yeah, that sounded really exciting.
Yeah, it was a good game. It was a really good one.
Very, very close.
And Team Italy, they ended up taking like 3rd place, I think, in the overall tournament. So they're really good players.
That's right. Yeah. Very nice. So my second game, I was playing as Joseph, who was playing Kingdom of Castle Doom. So Recon, that's obviously a good scenario for larger armies and faster armies. So he had 34 models led by Durin, a Dwarf Ballista, and a Dwarf King. So from the early on, it seemed to me that it should be a relatively easy game, because I have more models, they are faster, I have cavalry, I have mounted heroes. So all I just have to do is block him in the middle somewhere, not allow the ballista to do too much, and then run off some models. So it turned out to be a really bizarre game in that I think Joseph from the early on might have realized that I have a huge advantage. So I believe it was almost like he decided to, instead of trying to stop me from getting off, he decided to like try to deny me as many victory points as he could, I believe. Because I would basically try to position my models in a way to stop him from walking off, and then he would decide, okay, I'm just gonna walk in the other direction. So he would be trying to avoid combat and walk into places that I didn't really expect, and then just leave massive gaps where I was able to walk my army off. So I quite quickly realized that I will be able to walk more models off the board than he will. And I sort of thought to myself, well, if you want to move off your 20 dwarves and let me move off my 40 elves or whatever else I have, that's fine. So that's kind of how the game went throughout. His ballista, that was a bit of a worry. It was positioned in a way that I was able to, for most of the game, keep my guys like behind some sort of buildings and not actually give the ballista line of sight. So the ballista fired once in the entire game. It fired over 2 fences and it hit Theodred and dismounted him. So that was unfortunate. But then afterwards, I had a situation where I managed to actually get Legolas and Huron into heroic combat together, and then they jumped 10 inches forward, and then the next turn charged both of the ballista engineers. So essentially, the game sort of ended with him walking off, I believe, like 17 models, and me walking off like 28, and nobody breaking, no leader points. And like essentially towards the end, Legolas was trying to cause a wound on Durin to give me the extra VP.
Good luck, right?
Yeah. So the very first shot hits 6, yay. And then he takes the crown save 6, okay. And then I never caused another wound.
Yeah.
So yeah, the game was really nice. Joe was a really nice guy, and we had a fun chat and a fun interaction. But yeah, it was kind of relatively short, and we both just walked off. So I won 3-0 in the end by just having more models walking off. So it was nowhere as close or exciting as your game.
Yeah, my game was close and exciting, but hey, I'll take an easy walk off sometimes too, right?
Yeah.
That's a nice break, a nice mental break.
I feel like those are the two ways that Reconnoiter can go. And I think that's actually what's caused people's sort of polarizing opinions on Reconnoiter, because I know a couple of people who absolutely hate Reconnoiter entirely, and they're like, oh, both people just walk off, which I guess is kind of what happened in Mick's game. But
Oh,
I
that's
am
so
of the
rare. That
opinion,
never
and
happened to me
a
before.
lot of other people I know are also of the opinion where it's like Reconnoiter is just such a fun tactical scenario. Obviously, unless you play against like 100 Goblin Town models or something like that,
Yeah.
because you have to figure out like how many guys do I put over here, how many guys do I put over here, how do I get their heroes into the correct position, and get my heroes in the right place where I can either break through their lines or just try and hold them off in other places. So I think generally if you play Reconnoiter right, I guess, you can have a lot of very fun games that way, and they can be very, very close too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like
Yeah, I mean,
if you have to stop an eagle, then there's no way people are just gonna walk off on both sides.
right.
Like
Well, and so I had cavalry. I don't. He didn't, but he had an eagle. So like his goal was get rid of the cavalry. My goal was neutralize the eagle, right, and the angry Boromir with a lance. And like you were saying, Evan, there was this like cat and mouse game for like half of the movement phases just to see when does the opening come, and then recognizing the opening and being able to exploit it, right, takes the game one direction or another. And it was definitely, as far as the scenario goes, but just games in general, it was one of the tightest games of Lord of the Rings I've played, right? Like I was really good on my positioning. I was really, yes, I got luck some places, but clearly I lost luck other places. It was a game I'm very proud of, even though it didn't go my way in the end. I actually played Recon at the last Articon where it was against the Mummic war leader, and there was terrain that I hit in. And so he's like, okay. And he just walks his whole army off the board. And then I'm like, oh, well, now you've got an elephant and like a full howdah off the board. So my task is just how do I get that many models off the board, right? Like, so this one was really fun. It was really tactical. Gwei here is such an ass. He's just so hard to play against, but like he was exciting. I got a taste of my own medicine and got Boromir. Usually I'm the person Boromiring other people. Really, really fun. Very much enjoyed it. So
yeah, but that's the thing. Like Recon is a really, really good scenario. Like if both players commit to actually try to stop things and try to move your own things off. Because also I find like the most difficult thing I find in
it's really funny to watch.
It's like who's that from Finding Nemo? Is it Finding Nemo where it's like, yeah,
Dory,
like she'll just like talk very slowly
somewhere
sometimes.
around
I
the
think
map.
it's like that.
Is he back? There he is.
Oh, he's back.
Yeah, it's my intro better. Yeah,
you went into slow motion for a minute, and it was actually really fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm sort of in the middle of nowhere here, so the internet isn't the best, but yeah, hopefully that helps. Yeah, so I was saying that like my favorite thing about Recon is that sometimes say you have like an hour and a half left, or like an hour 15 minutes, and your furthest model is like 27 inches away from your opponent's board edge, and you're like, okay, if I'm gonna walk anything off, I basically have to commit the next 5 turns of at least one or two of these guys to be moving at full speed. And in the meantime, I know my opponent is going to do the same. And then how do we commit to that strategy? And also, since it's still quite early on, how do we even know how many models we can commit to? Because very often it's like you just need the extra numbers here or there to stop things, to block things, to shield, to get the surrounds. And sometimes committing too many models means suddenly you break and those models actually start running away. Or committing too many models means that you didn't surround a hero and now the hero survives and is actually chopping you down.
Yeah.
So yeah, I find it is like really, really tricky scenario to play, especially when you have a good opponent. Like my game against Evan in the Masters, no, not in the Masters, in the Masters qualifier. that was super close.
Mhm.
And that was basically just like, does either of us even get a model
Mhm.
off?
Right.
Yeah.
But
And
when
it
they
was
have
just
a
so,
flying
so much.
monster, right? That's a whole nother dimension you have to think about too,
Yeah.
right?
So like everyone had a Gulliver, and,
Yeah.
and then there was like an additional layer to it too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
so
really cool scenario.
it can be a scenario that's very rewarding, or it can be a scenario that's very boring, and it really depends
Yeah.
on like the opponent, like the mindset,
Yeah.
the armies. So sometimes you have a really tight game that comes down to the literal last dice roll. Other times you both walk your army off, right? So yeah.
Yeah, they happen.
Mhm.
All right, so round 3. What was the scenario
Round
for?
3. Okay, so having flown too close to the sun and being thrown down to the plebs,
By Guy here. He
by
caught you as
Guahir,
you were flying, and then he threw you down.
I thought the eagle
Yeah.
was there to save me. He just threw me into the Mount Doom, right?
Yep.
So this was the scenario was command the battlefield, and I got drawn against Mark Stone from the team from Team Wanderers in the Wild. What an amazing guy! I was actually I drove up to Ardacon with him and a couple of the other Wanderers guys. Really great guy. And so after having such a tense game, competitive game, I was actually really looking forward to playing, somebody who was a friend, right? Because you could have a really good competitive game, but there's just something different about playing someone and you're being friendly, right? And he was bringing the what's it called, the Depths of Moria Legion. So it was a Balrog leading 16 goblins with various gear and the goblin drummers, and then a Moria goblin captain with 6 goblins with various gear, some shields, some spears, and then a black shield shaman with 6 goblins, again with some shields and some spears. So a horde of goblins led by a Balrog, and the scenario was command the battlefield. So this is a Maelstrom scenario, and it's the one where you capture the table quarters, but the middle itself doesn't count for anything, right? So you have to be, I think, 12 inches from the center to count for anything. I was really looking forward to the game because of the opponent, but then I saw that I was fighting Balrog and a bunch of goblins, and I was like, man, this is actually going to be kind of tricky because he's got a Balrog, right? And so what I determined early is, if I can, the Balrog only moves 6 and he can only be so many places, right? So if I can keep the Balrog contained to one area and then just grab the rest of the table quarters, and keep Boromir away from the Balrog, like that's basically my strategy, right? So I maelstrommed in. Again, I had Madril, so it wasn't a problem for me to get on the board. And what I essentially ended up doing is I claimed one corner, the center of the board, and kind of brought in my army in like a bit of an L shape, right? And figuring that this way I could kind of move into 3 quarters depending on where he goes. And if he comes up behind me, then I just book it and just, abandon the quarter and swarm this way. If he comes in front of me, then we kind of almost go into a battle line fight. But that way I can get the most models across the battlefield while still kind of having some movement options. He ended up getting both of his captain and his shaman came on the opposite corner, like I mentioned. So he was kind of moving on that way. And then the Balrog and his warband came in the corner that was kind of above where my army was deploying. And so at that point I was like, okay, so we've got the Balrog and most of his goblins in a corner. So if I can pin them in that corner for long enough to just like hold them there, then what I could theoretically do is I could throw, a couple rangers and knights into the corners that he's probably never going to get to because of just his slow movement. And I can throw my heroes into clearing out another corner, and I can just use like an amorphous cloud of warriors to keep the Balrog and some goblins entertained long enough to establish enough of like a battlefield position that at that point he wouldn't catch up. And everything went spectacularly wrong from the get-go. So I executed the plan. We had the Balrog came in, I had my cloud, and I was like, some warriors are going to die horrible deaths. It's fine, right? The Balrog has to like slowly combat through him and whatever. Boromir, Faramir, and 2 knights created this little hit squad that like went after the other corner. So I was like, none of my heroes are anywhere near the Balrog except for Madril, who's hiding in a forest and just like calling moves. And they're going to clear out the rabble of 12 goblins, and then they're going to kind of double back and help the army. And nothing went correctly. So Boromir's hit squad went against his little like goblin picket line. And he smartly was like just kind of inching backwards. So I was like, screw it, I'm just going to get in his face so that he can't get away from me. They're goblins. I'm one heroic combat away from clearing this entire flank. Even if he charges me, whatever, like I've got Boromir, Faramir, and they're goblins, right? So he wins priority. I call the move. He wins the move off, charges in. I was like, all right, cool. So one turn of, maybe killing a goblin or two. I don't think I killed any, by the way. Like he won the fights. And I was like, that's no big deal. Next turn, call the move. He calls the move. He wins the move off. He gets back into me again. At this point, I'm like, that Balrog is going to get to me before I can clear through 12 goblins with Boromir and Faramir and 2 knights. Like, I'm fight a million, I'm bannered, I have a zillion attacks. Like, how am I still stuck here, right? And that's essentially what ended up happening. So, and then here I've got Warriors of Minas Tirith with Fountain Court Guard. They're fighting against basic goblins on a fairly numerically equal front, and I'm losing every fight. He's killing my warriors. Like, it's, and it's the stupid drum, right? So like I've got my 2 dice and I'm fighting 1 goblin. I'm like, great, cool. I roll a 5. He's like, oh, I roll a 1, drum into a 6, kill the warrior of Minas Tirith. And after a while, I find myself in a position where, so I've got my 2 rangers or 3 capturing 1 corner. I've got another 2 rangers capturing another corner. My whole army is stuck fighting goblins and losing. The Balrog has at this point finally managed to like whip and combat his way to threaten all my heroes, who are still standing there fighting 12 goblins. Eventually he gets there, right? Like he whips the Balrog in, the Balrog goes in. At this point, Boromir and Faramir have lost enough fights that they've lost their horses. Like it's just as a disaster. The Balrog gets in, starts eating through everything because it's the Balrog. And even with a strike, it's a 50-50, right? He eventually gets in on Boromir. I choose to call the defense instead because I was like, it's probably better than trying to go for a roll off on the strike with the Balrog. And then a ray of hope emerged, right? Where I finally managed to win. I think I win priority. And I was able to get just enough people to create a lane where Boromir could run away from the Balrog, like literally like snake through and run away. And at this point, any hope of like winning those fights went out of the corner, right? So I was like, all I need to do now is just keep Boromir alive and hopefully claim enough corners to pull this one out. And so the rest of the game ended up being Boromir having this like Benny Hill skit chase where like he would run 6 inches, Balrog would come up behind him, try to whip and fail. He would run 6 inches, Balrog would come up behind him, try to whip and fail. And I was like, I just need to keep Boromir alive and unwounded. The fight with the goblins went horribly. Like I got slaughtered in that corner. I finally broke. To compound it, all of my rangers failed their courage and fled. So like I wasn't even holding any corners anymore. I was like holding 1, but barely, right? And the final turn of the game, he finally got the whip into Boromir and gave him the hug from behind with a Balrog. That went exactly as you'd expect. He ended up eating him. And at the end of the game, I think I contested a corner, held a corner, and then I was broken. My leader was dead. I did nothing to him. I couldn't break an army of 15 goblins, right? So like nothing went my way. He just completely destroyed me. He got his oath. I think I actually got my oath as well. Yeah, I got my oath because I chose the kill the most, the most valuable model. And it was one of the goblin captains or the shaman or something. I did end up killing him in the end, but like he just rolled straight through me, and there's just nothing you could do, right? Like the strategy was sound, his strategy was sound, and he just it was like a green tide that ate the finest Gondor had to offer. And by the time I knew that like I wasn't able to get through those goblins, because the whole point was to get so far away from the Balrog that like not only am I contesting a corner, but he would have to basically chase the Balrog around the board all game. And if he chose to commit it to any one corner to clear it, that's fine. I'll just abandon that corner, but I'll be holding 3, right? Nothing went correctly. Balrog got into my heroes, ate through the center of my army. The goblins took the other corner. Everybody who wasn't a Fountain Court started running away because again, the drum, right? It gives you the -1 courage. And it was a solid drumming. So I got well and truly pounded into the dirt on that one. but I can't be mad. Like sometimes like you just lose fights, right? Like there's nothing you could do.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
the battlefield wide banner
the
is
thing about
so
Balrog,
good, right?
too.
So like he had a banner everywhere. My banner couldn't be anywhere. Like you lose 3 or 4 move offs with cavalry. Eventually it's going to go poorly, right? And that was the game. So,
Yeah, but like that's just one of those things about the Balrog. Sometimes,
yeah.
no matter what you do, as long as the Balrog rolls well, game is pretty much game over.
And
Yeah.
I had hope initially because he kept failing to whip. So I was like, he's going to have to get to me fair and square and go like model by model, right, with his little movement. And then eventually he finally like got the whip right into like a knight, dragged him in, combated over. And then at that point, I was dehorsed and I was not going to be able to get away from all of the
Oh,
goblins
no.
that now surrounded me. So I was like, well, now the Balrog's just going to eat me. So minus the one ray of hope where Boromir managed to like do, you know, call a heroic cowardice and like sneak out of the combat and start running away. Like there was just, it was a foregone conclusion at that point, right? So
So how many models did he actually start with?
he started with 33.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
And
it
he
wasn't
had
even
30.
like it wasn't even the largest like goblin horde, right? But like
No.
there was a drum and a Balrog and it still outnumbered me. So
Yeah.
But you know, Mark is an awesome guy, and I had a great game with him. And then you know, he
Mhm.
bought me a beer after the game and gave me a Guernseyan pound, like literally a banknote, to you know tip me for the Guernseyan pound he gave me on the tabletop. So
He was getting you drunk before round 4.
yeah, exactly.
What is this?
Yeah, so yeah, it was a really enjoyable game. I had a lot of fun, and sometimes when like Gondor's finest is losing fights to goblins, you just have to laugh about it,
Mhm.
right? Like it's a dice game,
Yeah.
and sometimes it just doesn't go your way, and that's what it is. So,
Yep.
so I
Yeah.
had a game that was very much a Mick moment, where like Boromir would charge into 2 goblins, lose his horse, and then the Balrog would show
Yay.
up behind him, like, hey,
Wait,
you
but
know?
like, why didn't you just spend like 4 points of might to win a combat or something like that?
Well, because I was running out of might at that point, and there was a Balrog behind me, so
Yeah.
it's like I had already blown through all of Faramir's might, right, to like call
Yeah.
the moves, right. I was winning the combats, I just wasn't killing anything, right. And then eventually I just didn't
Yeah.
win the combat, and it was like I rolled like a 3 high, and I could spend the rest of my might and maybe do
Yeah.
something, or I could take a chance. But it almost didn't matter at that point because Boromir couldn't get away. There was a wood next to him, so like there was nowhere to run. The Balrog was coming. Like it was at that point, it was trying to keep him alive and hold on to the quarters I already had. Because even though I
Mhm.
was miraculously losing every fight to the goblins in the one corner, at least I was still pinning him there. So he wasn't
Yeah.
getting goblins out of that corner. He still had to go through all of my models. And I was at that point at least holding 2, like contesting 1, and potentially could get another one. So it was just like salvage what I can at that point. But it all just went downhill anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Sometimes like these things happen when like no matter how many resources you put into something.
Yeah. If it's
It's
not
a
meant to be,
Balrog.
it's not meant to be, right? And the Balrog, like thankfully I was I was just saving some might to be able to call the moves or the defense or whatever, just to try and get away from him. And that ended up working up until again the last turn, where Boromir was booking it and the Balrog was like huffing it behind him. And the only thing that I could rely on was that he wouldn't roll the whip to get into Boromir, right? And then when he finally did, it was like, all right, well, this isn't going to go well, you know. So, but yeah,
I
like,
gotta get some.
calling heroic defenses was a good idea.
What's
I
that? Well, I
gotta
mean, if
get
I
some
strike and I get
advice
a
from
10, it's
him.
a 50-50, right? Like versus just
Yeah,
making him
yeah,
roll
yeah.
6s. So
And you're not really wounding him anyway, so you
no,
might as well just.
I'm never doing anything to the Balrog, and I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
breaking his
yeah.
army because the Legion doesn't break if I don't put 5 wounds on the Balrog,
Oh,
right?
yes, that's
I'm not
right.
so I'm not getting leader points. I'm not getting breaking points. His drum counts as a banner, and it's off in a corner, so I'm never getting to that, right? So his secondaries are assured. All I had going for me was trying to get the table corners, and of course the drum made all my stuff run away. So it's
The
just one
last
of those
time I
games.
played the Balrog was I don't think I won a single combat with it the entire game, so I guess I've got to get some advice from him. I feel like that's always the case with those big models like the Balrog and Sauron. Whenever you play against them, your opponent always just wins every fight and kills everything, and then you
Absolutely.
play as them and they lose every single combat and your army gets crushed.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I guess you had that experience where you played against them.
Yeah, it started going pretty well initially because like his might, because the Balrog has no might, so his might was away from the Balrog, so he had no way to like power it with moves and marches and stuff. So I was like, if I can get enough D6, D7 bodyguarded models in its way, I could keep it occupied. I didn't account for the SWAT team of goblins that came in and started murdering my guys left, right, and center. And eventually he just broke through and there was nothing I could do, right? And then that whip, right? Once he's able to like whip in combat, like
I mean,
there's
that
just,
whip is so strong. Like,
and then at one point, like he went into Faramir and he hit Faramir, wounded him, and then set him on fire, right, with his whip. So poor Faramir is there to sacrifice himself bodily for Boromir to get away and is just getting pounded on. But yeah, again, it was a very enjoyable game. It's just at one point it became very clear that I'm just doomed. I'm just doomed.
yeah, the thing with that whip, like if you end up moving like 9 inches with a heroic march, and then you whip something into combat for yourself, you do a free heroic combat. You've moved 15 with the Balrog.
Yep.
So in 2 turns you've moved 21 and you've charged, and
that's basically what happened. So like because of the way the terrain was, he kind of had to go around a little, but he was able to like combat, whip, move, whip into a combat, like, you know, he did Balrog things, right? So yeah. Yep. So that was game 3, and I had truly now hit the lows at 1 and 2. So it was the pleb tables for me.
Well, you were starting to go just as well as I did in the Masters.
Yeah, it was my opportunity to start submarining from here, right?
Exactly. Like it can only get better from here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So my third game, I was playing against Dewey Evans from the Guardians of Wiltshire team. So I'm not sure. I think he might have been a captain of it as well.
I think he was.
So they end up winning. Yeah, they end up winning the team event. They're a great team, and Dewey is a great guy. I played with him before. I think it was at the ETC last time we played, like 2018. Yeah, so every game I've had before with him was really good. So he was bringing in Angmar, but a bit of an unusual Angmar. Normally you'd expect a Gullivar or a Shade. He didn't have either of those. He had Witch King on horse with a crown, 315 too. He was leading some orcs and two Deadmar specters. Then there was Burder leading orcs and Deadmar specters. Well, actually, no Deadmar specters in his warband, and a Wild Ward and a banner. Then he had a Barrow White leading some orcs and a Warg Rider. And then he had another Barrow White leading some more orcs and a Warg Rider. So 42 models, including Witch King and 2 Barrow Whites and Birder. So scenario was again command battlefield. And I had the most bizarre start I've ever had in one of those Maelstrom scenarios. Basically, by the end of turn 1, we burned 9 out of the 15 points of might that were available to us across the 2 armies. So he started deploying first. His rolls didn't go so well, so he deployed 1 warband in on the left side of the board, in the middle. That had a Spectre and some orcs and a Warg Rider. Then he deployed another warband in the top left corner. That was, I believe, Birder with his guys. And then I'm not sure if the Witch King came on that turn or maybe he was coming on the next turn. But basically, I had a situation where I knew that I want to deploy in such a way that I want to like isolate one of the warbands, and I don't want to be focusing on the Birder one. The other one is much easier to isolate and actually crush on turn 2 very easily. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna roll for Theodred first. Hopefully he's gonna come right next to that warband, maybe surround it, throw some throwing spears, and then get into combat next turn. And the idea here was that if I managed to get all 3 of my heroes into that same place, then even if he was to win a heroic move with Witch King and maybe transfix someone or dismount someone. His Barrow Wight is still out of might, and his other Barrow Wight is too far away from me to cause any damage. So even if he was to turn off one of my heroes, I have the other two, and I should be able to like surround that one warband and take it down. So my dice rolls. Theodred rolls a 2. I'm like, oh, that's annoying.
It's the worst.
I don't want to might it down to 1, because then it doesn't really help me for him to come on next turn. If I mine it to a 4, then I have to then I get to pick the board edge that's next to Birder, and I really want like the east or west. All right, spend 3 might points. Put him there. So he's in position to charge.
Nice.
Then Hurin rolls his dice. I believe he rolled a 2. Okay, well, guess I'm just gonna might it down to 1. So hopefully he comes on somewhere nice next turn. Then Legolas rolled a 4, I believe. So that again was north or south, and I really needed him to come on the left. So I used the might point, and I basically had 2 warbands now kind of surrounding his one, and I positioned Legolas in a way that his heroic move next turn would catch everybody within the vicinity to get the charges and all. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure whether I did roll a 4 or 5, but basically I came on in that place, and I knew I was going to be spending a might point next turn to do a heroic move anyway. So irrelevant of what I rolled, the next turn, Legolas went down by another point of might because of the heroic combat. I managed to get all of my guys in, and I was in a situation where I was kind of sure that I was going to be taking out his warband. They were just going to die, and then hopefully Hurin comes in somewhere else where I can hopefully like help him, well, help the rest of my army and like really isolate his army. So then, not sure exactly how things went from there, but throughout the second turn, I forgot to dismount Legolas whilst charging a Spectre, no, a shade, not a shade, a Barrow Wight rather. So it's like, oh crap, I should have dismounted. So Witch King's Black Dart goes straight at Legolas.
Oh no! Yeah.
And Barrow Wight is fighting as Legolas, and Legolas was, I believe, trapped by like an orc, and he may have even rolled a 1 to fall off his horse. I would have to look at the pictures exactly what happened, but essentially, I then end up having to spend another might point not to lose a fight against that Barrow Wight. So somewhere by the end of turn 2, I took a picture of the might, will, and fate scores, and I wrote specifically turn 2. It was Legolas 1 point of might, Theodred 0, Hurin 0 because he decided to come on the board in the end, behind Birder's warband to stop those guys from coming on, from actually going to help the rest. Then his Witch King 1 point of mind, his Birder 1 point of mind. So I think it was also the case that Birder might have used 1 or 2 to actually come on the board correctly. So essentially, at the end of the second turn of the game, we spent 12 points of might.
So you were both playing. You were both playing No Might Angmar at that point.
Yeah, we were both Angmar basically, except he had the stealth and he had the terror, yeah. And I did not. So yeah, it became a game where it was sort of like my line surrounding a group of his guys, then my guys, then his guys, then my guys somewhere behind, like just a mess of everything. There was a funny situation where my Riders of Rohan kept failing courage tests to the Spectres, and Dewey kept moving them, especially one of them into this field, like a wheat field where the rider could only move like 2.5 inches per turn because it's difficult terrain. But then I realized, well, I can still throw my spear if the Spectre moved me. So then I'd be throwing over a fence, like, and end up killing an orc or something like that. So it became quite close throughout. Orcs were actually winning more fights than they should have been winning, and got to a stage where Legolas got charged by Birder, and I was worried he was gonna kill me, but Legolas ended up winning fight. Then there was another fight where Birder charged Legolas and actually won, but this time it was beneficial for him to actually throw to like actually no. Birder ended up fighting against Erkenbrand, Theodred, not Erkenbrand. God, so many confusions here. So Birder was fighting against Theodred, ended up throwing him across some lines. Then he was fighting against Legolas. Then Legolas managed to survive, didn't take any wounds. Then Legolas ran away, and I then started like splitting off to actually start taking objectives because it seemed he's gonna break first. And then there was this bizarre moment when Dewey realized that in order to preserve as many victory points as he could, he needed to end the game as soon as possible. And to do that, you have to get down to 25%. So we still had enough time on the clock. And there was a situation where if we play like an extra turn, then he might fail a couple of courage tests in one of the corners of the board, and I will be scoring more points because I have more models in those corners. So he went into this thing where he charged two of my guys with Birder, who had by then had only one wound and no fate left, and he decided to charge a guy who had a bow and a guy with a shield, so I couldn't double shield. And there was a moment where I was like, hold on a moment. If I kill one more of your models, the game ends. So I don't want to kill anybody, but I have to fight Birder. And then he goes, he decides to piercing strike. I'm like, oh, that's the thing. Well, luckily, Birder actually managed to win combat against those guys, and he was out of might, so he couldn't might it down. So my guys managed not to kill Birder. Normally he would always want to kill him, but this time I didn't. And so the game played one more turn. He failed his courage test, and I managed to actually put enough models in the corners. Huron was like hit by a Barrow White early on, so he slept for a couple of turns. Theodred kind of did some fighting, but then didn't do very much. Legolas didn't do a huge deal. But yeah, I think just the quality of my troops outkilled the quality of his troops. And yeah, it was just a very bizarre game with like no one having any might at the end of turn 2.
That's such a weird Maelstrom deployment, right? That's so crazy.
Like I must have spent like I think I spent 6 points of might on or like 7 points of might to deploy, and he spent like 2 or 3 points of might to deploy. Something ridiculous like that. But yeah, it was worth it in the end.
Yeah, I mean, it turned out to be the right call.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, I always feel like people don't spend enough might for deployment, and like at the end of the day, yeah, like it's more valuable for you to have less might, but actually have your guys in the right place, than for you to have your might somewhere at the other end of the board where it's irrelevant.
I also find a lot of people are afraid to might 2s down to 1s to not come in, because sometimes it's just better to spend the might to not come in, right? And be like, I can do better next turn, right?
When you're deploying first.
Yeah.
Because then essentially you're passing priority to your opponent to deploy more. Like if let's say you deployed 2 warbands and then you roll a 2, okay, well, I'll drop it down to 1 so that my opponent can deploy and then I can react. So it's very often a good idea to might it down to a 2.
Yeah, I agree.
But then if you then roll the 2 again, it's like, oh,
yeah, nothing you can do at that point, right? It's also it just goes the few models that have an ability to modify Maelstrom, how valuable that is, because that's a point of might, right? If you think about it in those terms. And so several times in this tournament, Madrill helps me out by putting people, even taking a 5 and making it a 6 to give you more flexibility, right? Things like that. So if you have that ability and it's a Maelstrom mission, it's really, really valuable.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's just such a great thing to have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just generally, I pretty much always tell people burn your might in Maelstrom missions, because either you do or your might will just not be used in anywhere in that game, and then why did you even have it in the first place?
Yeah. What's the point of spending it to call the march to get to where you need to go if you could just spend it to get to where you need to go? So
and actually be there on time and actually be able to do things.
Yeah.
You might not have all of your might to play with, but it's better to have some of it somewhere than all of it in an irrelevant place.
Well, and that's one of those things that I completely agree with you, but it's impossible to like teach, right? Because it's such an instinct thing, right? Of like when you get to a certain point in the game where you've been playing long enough, you start to just feel, hey, this is really a place where I just need to burn the might versus, not burn the might. And there's no way to really concretely write a tactica on how to do that, because it's just, you have to kind of feel the game, right?
Yeah. Like it also really depends on like how many points of might does opponent have, where like if they were to not burn the might, what that will mean. If they were to burn the might, what's that gonna mean? Like you just have to have so many things to weigh into it. So I often find that the Maelstrom scenarios I like the ones where you really sort of get you really see the best players doing certain things and the weaker players not, and like you really can see the difference in skill level based on how they manage Maelstrom scenarios.
Well, and in a tournament scenario setting, you really have to make those decisions like instantly, right? You can't like sit there and think about it, because you don't have the time to think about it. You just have to get going. So
you can't call a friend or watch a podcast or listen to a podcast.
Take a 50-50 lifeline.
Burn, not burn, flip a coin.
Yeah. Well, good job. You pulled it out in the weirdest Maelstrom game ever.
Yeah, but Command Battlefield is really, really fun scenario, and I had a really good opponent and a really great game, so that was really cool.
Yeah, and that's been a trend for me. I had really great games with really great opponents through the whole tournament, which was awesome, right? Because I mean, obviously it's tense, competitive, high level, whatever, but at the end of the game, win or lose, you just have a beer with them, and it's just such a great it was just such a great vibe at this Articon. It was very chill. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it was hot, but it was chill.
Oh, so hot. Oh God, I drank so much water, but yet there were like I would stand over the table and be dripping sweat on my models. It was gross. It was just disgusting. So yeah.
Well, I wasn't doing that, but I was drinking about like a liter of water per game.
At least.
So by the end of the main event, day one, I drank like 5 liters of water.
Easy, right? Easy. So yeah. Anyway, I guess game 4, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so game 4, speaking of having great opponents, so for game 4, I was drawn against Michael Haskell from Team Entmoot. I don't know if there is a nicer human being that plays strategy battle game. Like, this was the nicest guy I've ever met.
I have to agree.
Oh, he was awesome. That kind of goes for the entire Team Entmoot roster. Like, they're a great group of players, great group of guys. And it was, after getting pounded on by the Balrog, it was just such a pleasant treat to draw somebody who was so nice. He ended up getting my sportsmanship vote too. And he's a listener to the podcast. So hi, Michael, thanks for the game and thanks for listening. But in any case, so the scenario was Clash by Moonlight, and he was bringing the Blackgate Opens Legendary Legion, which actually was really fun to look at, because I was like, this is going to be a no frills, just like a standard fun Lord of the Rings game. There's not a lot of tricks to manage. It's just 2 battle lines with some big heroes hitting each other in the middle. And that was really great. And so he had the Troll Chieftain with 5 Morannon Orcs with shields, 4 Orcs with spear, and a Orc with a spear and a banner, a Morannon Orc Captain with a shield, with again 5 Morannons with shield, 5 Orcs with spears, and then another Orc with a spear and a shield. And then he had the Mouth of Sauron on his armored horse with 4 Morannon Orcs, 6 Orcs with spears, and 1 Troll Drummer. So he had the big guy with the drums. Very, very cool list, beautifully painted, just like a joy to look at, right? And again, just like a wonderful, wonderful person piloting it. Unfortunately, all of the miserable luck that I had in the last game came back for me in this game, and it's just like I sucked up all the luck in the game. So it's Clash by Moonlight. I have bows and he doesn't have bows, so I kind of deployed, you know, I think you deploy on the 12 line. So I deployed on my 12 line. He deployed on his. He knew he was going to have to come to me because theoretically I could sit back and like try to shoot him with my 6 bows, 7 bows. I never really saw that as a realistic prospect because by the time you get into line of sight, you kill 1 or 2 models and it's not a thing. So the terrain was, you had like one building, it was like a lake townhouse or something here, another lake townhouse kind of dissecting the battlefield, and then one of those wheat fields you talked about, Mick, right, where it's like it's a field of wheat with a fence around it. And I put Faramir kind of like hugging one house, Boromir hugging the other house, just enough so they can see out, and then like a loose battle line between them and a loose battle line that kind of covers the field area so that the troll couldn't weirdly flank me or something like that. And my plan was pretty simple, just, you know, get into the lines and fight him, right? Like I wasn't going to sit back and shoot or try to do anything tricky. There was just no reason to, because it was just Moran and orcs, right? He ended up marching up with the drum. Obviously, he had his Mouth of Sauron coming in and the troll chieftain behind him. And we were in a position where he had his line of orcs and Morannons and his heroes behind. And I knew that that was just the moment to go in, because then I could try to trap that chieftain behind his line as long as possible and not have to deal with him, basically, right? The chieftain being his leader, but this is the Black Gate Open, so it was like a mega chieftain, right? He had the extra might and everything. And that's essentially exactly what happened. So he marched within the range of my heroes. I sent Faramir into 2 orcs. I sent Boromir into 2 orcs. Everybody who could charge in went around them, right? And I had a situation where it was like, you know, a 2-on-2 fight, Faramir, a couple 2-on-2 fights, Boromir, a couple 2-on-2 fights, and then the rest of my models kind of closed the gap just to protect my flanks, because I figured they could hold out against just a bunch of orcs and a captain over there, because I had the fight 5 and I had the banner essentially everywhere because it was such a tight area. And it was just one of those games where everything went my way. So I called 2 hero combats. Faramir killed 2 guys, went into another 2, killed them. Boromir killed 2 guys, went into another 2, killed them. I won every fight down the line. By the end of turn 1, I think I killed something like 12 or 13 orcs and Morannon orcs. Like it was, his army was a total of 35 models, and he was like almost broken after the first combat, right? It was rough, and that was just dice, right? Like, yeah, sure, I weighted it in such a way that I had the banner and like it was favorable to me on fight, right? But like all the luck I didn't have killing goblins in the first game, like my models were clearly embarrassed, and it just came back and it just went straight in. And at that point, so I had a pretty good control of the center. I'd sent 1 knight around the flank just to kind of threaten the Mouth of Sauron to keep him from casting stuff. He had thrown, at some point he threw, I think, a couple immobilizes or something like that, but I resisted everything with my will. Like my dice were just great. And most of the game after that was essentially just, you know, win priority, tie up some fights, win some fights, kill some stuff. He managed to get the troll chieftain finally to come in on Boromir. But it was the same thing. Strike off, I'd go to 10, he wouldn't, I'd win the fight, right? Strike off, I'd win the fight, right, on a roll off or something. And by the end of the game, like he had no might left. Boromir, every time he would go into the troll chieftain at that point, he would just strike and auto win the fight, right? I was kind of cleaning up orcs here and there. At one point he was definitely broken, so things started running away on his side. And I think on like the last or second to last turn of the game, I ended up just surrounding the troll chieftain, putting Boromir in, and was able to just take him. So I was able to kill him. I wasn't able to do the same to the troll drummer, who was my oath, was to kill the second most expensive model. Faramir, you know, kept charging into him and failing miserably to do anything. So classic Faramir flailed around long enough to do nothing after his initial glorious charge that cleared some orcs. But at the end of the game, I'd killed his leader, I'd broken him. And then the secondaries for the mission have to do with killing or having more heroes than your opponent, right? So I definitely got that. I didn't get my oath. I don't remember if he did. It was a really fun game. We had a really great time. I felt bad. You know, when you suck up luck at a game, you just feel bad because it's like, oh man, I'm just pounding on you and I don't mean to be, but like dice are dice, nothing I can do. Last game, it was me kind of thing. You know what I mean? But yeah, so it was a fairly straightforward game where, you know, two armies without a lot of tricks just ran into each other, and I ended up getting the advantage on it. So yeah, but really great game. I can't stress enough how nuts of an opponent he was, and how he took it as a good sport. I'll put it that way. So
Yeah, I played against Michael a few times, and I can confirm he's probably one of the nicest people out there.
Yeah, it's disarmingly nice, right? I'm like, oh man, you're so nice that you're just gonna roll through me and I won't know what hit me, right?
You're just going to destroy me and smile afterwards.
I'm gonna have nightmares of you smiling at me after what you're about to do to me, right? But unfortunately for Michael, that didn't end up being the case, and you know, the Gondorians took it in that particular round. So so I was on 2-2. I was back on neutral.
Nice. Coming back, submarine.
That's right.
So in my fourth round, I was playing against the thing that did a bit of a surprise on me the previous day. The thing that came and bulldozed my entire army for long.
Oh no! Run away!
He's back.
Yeah.
He's so fat.
So as soon as the draw happened, I walked over to Sean and I quoted Maximus from the Gladiator. I said, "I will have my vengeance."
Yeah,
in
there
this
you
life
go.
or the next.
You went in there and said, "It's a trap. I can't repel firepower of that magnitude."
Yeah. So again, Clash by Moonlight. He had like nine bows with his fiefdom. So it was Imrahil doing here Forlong and Angbor with a bunch of models, like about 32 models or so. So early on, I was thinking, well, unless he gets into combat early on, then I'm just gonna outshoot him. So he tried doing a heroic shot against some of my elves, and I did a heroic shot with my Legolas. So luckily, thanks to me winning a heroic shoot off, I managed to start taking down some archers, and it quickly became apparent that he had to start getting into combat because otherwise his stuff would just collapse because of all of my bows. And Legolas was doing like these miracles where he would shoot 3 arrows, take out 2 guys. He would shoot 3 arrows, take out another 2 guys. So he was doing super well. So I managed to break him probably. Well, it was relatively early. It was like maybe just a few turns into combat, and then Imrahil gets into combat, and Forlong is like slowly moving towards me, and it's like, oh no!
As your sweat increases, yeah.
What do I do? And I realized that in this scenario, even if you break your opponent and you don't break yourself, if they have killed a hero of yours, then they're still winning. Like if let's say, I believe the points go 3, 5, 7 for you having killed heroes. If you have heroes alive, and then there was something else about killing heroes. So essentially, I was really worried about sending any of my heroes into combat. So that meant that he was actually sending all of his heroes into combat, and he was doing more damage to me than I was to him. But luckily, on one of the turns, Erkenbrand got into his Imrahil.
Erkenbrand's back.
Like, okay, I have to do something here. Otherwise my army might just collapse. And like, if we both break and don't kill heroes, then it would be a draw, and it's really disappointing. So Erkenbrand gets into Imrahil and actually manages to cause a wound. So
by the way, we should put up like a guide, just like on this podcast, like in the description. Every time Mick says Erkenbrand, it's Theodred.
Yeah, he meets Theodred. That's right. Yeah.
Theodred. Okay, so Theodred manages to get into Imrahil, and he causes a wound.
Amazing.
Well, like 2 wounds or however many, and Imrahil fails his fate points to a point where 1 wound has been caused, and so we're still playing out. And in the end, I'm not sure if we went to time or if the game is the game end on this on a roll of a 1 or 2 after break. I believe it is.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Oh no! Actually, no. It's
a quarter. It's a quarter. Yeah.
It's a quarter. So in the end, I managed to quarter him on exactly the same turn that he broke me, and Erkenbrand managed not to die. So I won 4-3, I believe it was, because or 3-2 rather, because of causing the wounds and break on each side, or it could even be a 2-1 in fact, because of causing wounds and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't exactly remember the victory points at the moment, but essentially it was just a win by like one victory point.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was very close, very tactical. It's really hard to like describe it any more detail, because like really like things were just moving here, moving there, and like everything was just like, you move an inch in the wrong direction, something's gonna run through, Fallen's gonna come in, Fallen's gonna wreck your army. So yeah, you don't want that happening. So
Mick's Forlon
was
PTSD.
playing extremely cautiously with my heroes, because like if that Fallen gets in and I flop my dice rolls again, I've lost.
Mick just put a brain in a far corner, right?
So yeah, that was just constantly playing on my mind, because there was a moment where like Huron was kind of within charging range of Fallen. I had to like throw some guys and sacrifice them to just make sure that Fallen doesn't go and destroy me.
Oh man,
But yeah, it was
just
super
push through your
close.
whole army.
Yeah, I had a great time with Sean. So yeah, another really good game.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really good.
And that was the end of day one. So we all got to change our bathing suits
3
at
wins
that
and a
point.
draw. Yeah.
And,
yeah, I believe I think after the third round, I actually went up to my room, had a cold shower, came down. I think it was just so hot.
God,
But that was my
so
first
hot.
game on the top tables.
Yeah.
So yeah, the VIP area.
There you go.
Nice. Yeah.
See, Mick submarined across events even. It was
so, instead of it being like 45 degrees in the main hall, it was maybe like 43 degrees up there.
Yeah. Well, such is the life of the other half in this game, with their fans and their dedicated judge.
Exactly.
So that took us to the end of day one. We were all exhausted after 4 games in the sweltering heat. I was on 2-2, you were on 3-1, so not so bad, right? 3-1-0, right? Or 3-0-1, whatever it would be. 3 and a draw. So we all, did not get a good night's sleep, because this is Articon, where we stayed up way too late socializing with our friends, and came back for day 2 for round 5. And round 5 was retrieval, or as most people call it, capture the flag, because that's really what it is. It's the one where you have the two objectives that you have to move into your corner and prevent yours from being moved. And I drew Kevin van Ravensfly. I definitely did not say that right, and so I apologize to you, Kevin. I believe he was Dutch. I think he was one of the Rotterdam White Scars from their team, if I'm not mistaken. Super nice guy. We had a really great game against him as well, which I'll go through, obviously. And he was playing the host of the Dragon Emperor, so he had the Easterlings, which was a very interesting. Like looking at it going into it, I didn't really know if that was good or bad for me on the scenario. But he had the Dragon Emperor, obviously, with a Black Dragon Cataphract with drum. He had 6 Black Dragons with shield and axes, so he actually paid to give them axes. And then 11 Black Dragon Warriors with shield and pike. He then had Brorgir with 4 Easterling Warriors, not Black Dragons, with shields and axes, and 7 with shields and pikes. And his last warband was a Dragon Knight on his armored horse with 2 Black Dragon Cataphracts, again with axes, and 1 Black Dragon Warrior with bow, just a random like 1 bowman. So a very interesting army. I knew that against my army, the axes would actually be relevant, because I wasn't playing all Fountain Court guards, so that D6 would be bad to have him piercing strike up and be killing me on 5s, because usually in Easterlings versus Gondor fights, your troops don't do anything. They just kind of bounce off each other, and then the heroes do all the work. But in this case, his troops could actually do the work. And because he had the Dragon Emperor, my fight 5 didn't really mean anything, right? So now, probably the most important role of the entire game was the role to determine deployment side. So you deploy in a corner, and I looked at the battlefield, and there was in the center, there was like a set of 3 huts, right? Kind of in a triangle. And then there was a forest in each corner, kind of where the objectives would end up being. And I noticed immediately that the way that the huts were positioned, if I took one corner, the hut opening was almost exactly the size of a dragon emperor, meaning that he really couldn't do anything but fit the dragon emperor and maybe 1 or 2 guys on his side. And then the huts themselves were more than 6 inches long, so he would have to split his army outside of his fight range and kind of like come to me. And so we rolled for deployment. I won the roll, and I was able to take the corner that I really liked, and that completely changed the way that I approached the game. So he, obviously deployed his dragon emperor the only place he could, which was right in the center, to try and shoot through that gap. And then he put some guys on this corner and some guys on this corner with the dragon knight, and he was just going to drum everything forward. I deployed centrally, kind of in front of the dragon emperor, with Boromir and Madril, and then I deployed a picket line of Faramir and a couple guys off to the side that was just going to kind of close the flank to keep him from coming in, because his only hope was really to break through me and get to my objective, right? Because what else is he going to do? And so that essentially was the start of the game, and it started off pretty like it could have gone pretty poorly for me in the immediate case, because I won the priority. I was able to charge into the Dragon Emperor to kind of pin him in place with one guy, so he'd have to kind of do the combat through one guy to get to another guy, put a few guys on the flank so he had nowhere to go, and then he'd essentially have to break through me. But he brought Borgir in, and he's like, all right, I'm going to tremor that guy. He tremors the center, and out of my 6 guys, he kills 4. So the guy fighting the Dragon Emperor and all 4 of the guys around him in that little cluster immediately died. And I was like, well, this is going to be a quick game, because my whole plan is to keep him trapped in the center while I do other things and get like a good position on him. And if he breaks through on turn 2, like, I've got a Dragon Emperor on my objective and I'm screwed, right? Luckily, the Dragon Emperor charged into the like one guy remaining, because he still had a control zone there, lost the fight. And that one lone guy was able to push him back. And that the next turn, I either won priority or won the move off, one of the two. And I was able to kind of bring forward the next round, right? And keep a solid contingent of troops plugging that gap, so that the Dragon Emperor basically was just held in place. And he was expecting me to have Boromir just kind of supporting those fights, because he figured I'd want the fight 5. But what I did instead was I took Boromir, and I noticed that he was kind of creeping with a couple Easterlings down the flank. And I just threw Boromir into that flank, and I hit 2 Easterlings. I brought some guys with him. I kept a few guys, because he was using his Dragon Emperor or his Dragon Knight rather, and a couple cataphracts to march behind me, and I think to try and threaten my objective. So I kept the picket line so that he couldn't get to me. And my thinking was, if Boromir can clear everyone off this flank, then I don't have to worry about that. I sent Faramir into the other flank where he had a line of Easterlings, and Faramir and a couple knights charged in there. And he didn't have he had his banner, but he couldn't see it. So he wasn't going to get rerolls most places. And he wasn't going to get his fight 5 because the Dragon Emperor wasn't in place. So I felt relatively confident that I could at least hold them up. And that actually started going really well for me. So Boromir heroic combated through like 4 Easterlings. The 2 buddies he took with him killed their Easterlings that they were fighting. At one point, he realized that he needs to reinforce that flank. So he threw in the Dragon Knight and a cataphract into like one of my picket lines. I was able to use Boromir to heroic combat off of the Easterlings into the Dragon Knight and kill him. So essentially at that point, I had cleared the entire flank and cleared all of the threats to my objective from that one side, which meant that now I could just keep like 1 or 2 guys to play with the 1 or 2 Easterlings left over there, and then bring Boromir back to the center where I could start having real fights. On the other flank, it went equally well for me. Faramir won his fight, killed his 2 Easterlings. I think both of the knights won their fights, killed their Easterlings. So I was starting to thin the flank there. And then I was feeling I was in a really good position, because he really couldn't break through easily in the center, because the Dragon Emperor was pinned with most of my army in front of it, and Boromir now floating around to exploit any potential breakthroughs. On the other side, he had no might. I had Faramir with his knights that were going to keep charging into him. So the only thing that he kind of reassessed, he brought his drummer back, and he was just going to start marching it around the battlefield to threaten my objective. And I was like, okay, well, that'll take several turns, so I've got some time. The next turn was a big one. I called the move with Madril, because at this point it was like, I need to pick the favorable fights to keep the Emperor contained, essentially. and be able to like position correctly. And I called it. I won the move off. I started positioning. Everything was going swimmingly. And then I looked over and realized I made the biggest mistake you could possibly make. I had forgotten about Faramir. And so I didn't call the move with Faramir. So he's with his knights, is standing in front of all of the Easterlings.
Oh,
and even
no.
though he couldn't contest me, I forgot about him and forgot to call the move. So he wasn't going to get the charge. And I was like, that's it. That's like the game losing mistake where you just like really make a huge error to the point that you can't come back from it. But that's the game. So I was like, well, we'll go for it. But Faramir, mighty Faramir, had decided this was the moment to show his quality. He gets charged. It's like a 6 dice on 2. Both of the knights get charged. Faramir rolls the 6, wins the fight, kills the Easterlings fighting him even without the charge. I was like, that's it. That's the moment, that he showed his quality for the tournament. Neither knight loses their fight. I don't think they kill the models they're fighting. But point is, the flank that should have collapsed or at least been dehorsed is still in there. And suddenly that becomes a game again, right? At the end of a couple rounds, it became very clear that like he was just never going to get through with the Emperor. So he did the smart thing and he actually voluntarily dismounted. So he was able to get on foot and take all of his black dragons and just flood the center, right? Because I had all the models there. He was running out of models. And if he didn't do that, he was just not ever going to have any hope of breaking through. And at this point, the fight 5 and the banner was less valuable to him than actually doing something to my army, right? Because one flank was clear, his Dragon Knight was dead, he didn't really have anything threatening me, and then Faramir had free reign over the other flank. And then it kind of became a game of cat and mouse, right? We'd call moves, we'd pick fights here, Boromir would kill some stuff, the Emperor would kill some stuff. Eventually, Faramir kind of circled back because I didn't feel like I needed him to hold that flank by himself anymore. I just threw a few guys in there to hold it. Faramir came back to help. And it got to a situation where the last turn of the game, it became very clear that he was going to now be in a position where he could drum himself onto my objective, right? So I was like, okay, well, I have to take Boromir, and he is on a horse. I kept him within 10 and just go and sit on it because he's unlikely to kill Boromir. But at that point, even if he does, he can't move the objective because Boromir didn't pick it up. He was just sitting on it. So I had to do that. And I had to call a heroic move with him and Madril, I believe, to do it. And I couldn't quite do what I wanted to do, which was pull all of my forces back in order to just kind of protect points at that point, because he was broken. I was not broken. No objective was going to be threatened. Leaders were pretty much not going to be threatened. So it really all just came down to me maintaining my position. It became very clear instantly that there was just no way I was going to be able to get away. So the best thing I could do was just pick favorable fights that would swing it, more towards me than to him. And so it's the last turn of the game. He has to kill, it was either 4 or 5 models. I stacked it in such a way that fights were in my favor 2-1. The Emperor had 1 guy on him and then 2 more blocking him. So he would have to go combat through them. There was no will left on Borgir, so there was no Blade Wrath. So it really was just the mercy of the dice at this point. And, what do you think happened? So we get to the fights. I'm fighting 1 Easterling bowman with a ranger and a fountain court and a warrior, loses the fight, kills a model. Uh-oh. Emperor obviously wins the fight, kills his model, heroic combats into the other 2, wins that fight, kills both of them, even though he needs a 5 and a 6 or something, or 2 6s. And at that point, on the last dice roll of the game, he kills a model and finally breaks me, which brought it from a win to a tie on the very last fight. So fair play to him, right? It was a tight game. And if I had been able to position better and get people away from him, I would have. But at that point, there's nothing you can do. It's the mercy of the dice. I figure he needs 6s to kill anything. I'm fight 5, he's not, right? There's just a lot going in my favor. And just the whole game, the Emperor has just been useless. He keeps losing fights, doesn't kill stuff. And this is the turn he decides to show up. So it felt like it was going to be a fairly comfortable victory. And then on the last turn, he gets just enough models to break me, and we ended in a draw. I did get my oath because I killed the Dragon Knight. And so I was sitting on 2-1-2 with 4 oaths at this point, which was a fairly average record, but the O's were kind of pushing me up top. So depending on how I did next round could either launch me fairly high or torpedo me all the way down. But
To
again,
100.
another really great game. It was very tense. We were having, even though it was a very like tight game and everything was like about positioning, and so we were very like we were very in it. We were both very nice. The table next to us, it was like a screaming match between an old married couple. It was uncomfortable, right? Like I thought there was going to be a fist fight. So several times we'd stop and just be like, no matter what happens, I'm just glad we're playing the game we're playing and we're not on that table, right? And fair play to him. It was really, really close. If I had not gotten the deployment I wanted, I think it would have been a little bit worse for me because the Easterling Pike line tends to roll through mine with the Emperor given free reign. But being able to trap the Emperor in the center without anywhere to go kind of really saved my bacon and allowed me to dictate the terms of the battle in the way I wanted. So really good game, really
Very
close.
nice.
And I was happy to come out of it with a draw, even though I was so close to that win. I could taste it.
It's funny how your game was like super exciting, and everything really depended on the initial deployment.
It was very important, yeah.
So like in my case, I got paired against Jay Acharya, who finished second in the tournament, and I was really looking forward to playing him. He had the Rivendell Knights, but then there was a repairing.
Oh no!
On the repair, they paired me up against Andrzej, who's a Polish guy, really, really nice person. But unfortunately, he had Legolas, Tauriel, a Mirkwood Ranger captain, and 27 Rangers.
Oh.
And the board was similar to yours in that there was a forest in one corner, a forest in another corner, a wheat field in another corner, and then the other corner had a forest, but not quite in the place where the objective had been. So I figured if I win deployment roll, then I can basically deploy in a way that he cannot be in a forest with the objective. Unfortunately, he won the roll-off. Himself in a different forest, surrounding the objective, and basically went, I'm gonna sit here. So I then thought about my options, and I was like, okay, I either start moving forward. I'm like, YOLO, maybe I might just get there. Maybe I can break him. But there's somewhere between 90 to 120 shots coming at me. In average odds, I'm gonna lose like 15 to 20 models by the time I get there.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna hide behind all these tents. After about 30 to 45 minutes, we agreed on a draw.
Yeah, that's just a boring game at that point, right? There's nothing to do.
Yeah. But I realized I would have won had Legolas had another cloak, because I like my whole game plan for the first several turns, for like 30 to 45 minutes, was to basically get Legolas into positions where he was able to shoot out something, but like my opponent would get maybe like 3 or 4 shots within the waist back at him. So he actually ended up killing like 5 guys. And I was like, if I only have an Elven Cloak, I can just dismount you, I can put you behind a fence, and you will break that entire army, and I win.
Yeah.
But I didn't. So
because who does, right? Nobody does that, right? So
nobody puts an Elven Cloak on a horse.
It's like Evan, you were talking about the game you had where it's like you had points left over, so you took the Morgul Blade, and usually you'd be like whatever, but that game you played Smaug, and it was like the most important piece of war gear in the universe, right? So
yeah. But in this case, had I just taken the Elven Cloak, there would have been no way for me to lose this game.
Yeah.
or to even draw. There would have been no way for him to win this game. Yeah. But like he knew from the start, if he moves out, I'm gonna go into combat and he dies. And if I get out of cover, I die.
Yeah.
So then we agreed on a draw. Then we were like, okay, well, let's just play it out. We still have like over an hour. So we played it out. I got demolished. But
no take backs.
Just for fun, we set up a Legolas versus Legolas encounter. We both had a foot Legolas, and my Legolas beat his Legolas and killed him.
Yes.
So I technically won the game.
There you go. You won the moral high ground.
Yeah. It was just a really unfortunate matchup.
Yeah.
Nothing I could have done it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of unfortunate matchups, should we go into
let's
game
go
6?
to round 6.
Game 6. So as I said, so I was sitting on 2-1-2 with 4 oaths. So like my of course tourney's gonna freeze. It's okay. I remember this one very well. So I could either win with an oath and do really well, or I could lose without an oath and do very mediocre, basically, right? At this point, I was not going to be like all the way at the bottom, but I was going to be somewhere middle in the pack if I lost. And so, so a lot was riding on this game. The scenario was, that is not the scenario. Tourney is messing up. The scenario was to the death, which when I saw that, I immediately was like, yes, this is a wonderful scenario for me because I've got Boromir with the banner. He is my leader and he is a banner and he's a really good character at killing stuff. So this is going to be awesome. And then I scrolled down a little further and my heart sank and I was looking at what I was playing, Black Riders. So into the death, the one scenario that favors me in almost every single like matchup except for Black Riders, because my leader is my banner and he's now going to have to fight against 7 black darts a turn and there's nothing I can really do to stop it, right? My opponent, and this was both better and worse, my opponent was Damien O'Byrne from Team Wanderers in the Wild, who is a really dear friend of mine and I love him to death. Also one of the guys that I drove up with and potentially awkwardly would be driving home with. And so like the winner of this game gets somewhere fairly okay. The loser goes into, you know, the sea of mediocrity. And I look at it and I'm like, this is going to be awesome because I'm playing against one of my best friends, but how do I win against Black Riders on To the Death? Like, I was like, okay, that's fine. Let's play it out. I get to the table and I sent you guys a picture of this in the chat. The table is completely open with 2 tiny little like lake town outhouses as the only terrain. And so I'm like, not only is it bad enough that this is almost unwinnable on scenario, I also have nowhere to hide. Like this is going to be a massacre. But you know, you play the cards you're given. So I decided to give it a try. And you know, and we're having fun by this point. You know, we got a beer and we're bantering and we're just having fun with it. And I figured, so the only way that I could really win this game is to keep Boromir away from all of the black darts until I could at least get into a good position. His army was the Witch King and 6 Wraiths. Witch King had, I think, 3 Fate, 3 Might, and all the other Wraiths had 2 Might, 2 Fate. And most of them had 7 or 8 Will, give or take, right? Something in that vein. But yeah, most of them had 8 Will except for like 1. The Witch King also had the Morgul Blade. And so I had my 2 little huts, my non-cover, and I had a forest and one of those like wheat fields that you talked about earlier. And I decided, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to deploy in kind of like a little amorphous cloud, right? Just like everybody is spread apart so that he can't do like weird compel tricks to like open up gaps and try to just put control zones until I see what he commits to. And surround my whole army in this amorphous cloud of Gondorians. And Boromir is going to play all the way in the back until and out of black dart range until I can figure out how this game is going to start going. He deploys everything fairly centrally. First movement phase is pretty uneventful. I start seeing kind of where he's going to go. So I start pulling my troops more towards the center between the forest and the hut. My other troops kind of move forward. Boromir stays where he is. He you know, doesn't really do anything because there's no reason to. Next turn, he kind of I win priority at that point. He doesn't call the move. And so I was like, okay, I think that I can start doing something to contain the wraiths here. And so my Citadel Guard, who conveniently has bodyguard, was able to charge in and just hold up 2 wraiths. And then behind him, I started swarming my army forward. Now, most of my army does not have bodyguard, but I did have the 10 Fountain Court and the Citadel Guard, and they literally were the only things carrying the game because the rest of my army was Courage 1. I can't charge anything, right? And then I also threw Faramir up there kind of almost as bait. And my whole game plan was draw out as many of his resources as possible in terms of like might and will, so that by the time I inevitably have to start committing Boromir to do something, you're just like, you're drawn out of your various like might and will, so you're not as threatening to me. he spends some will to black dart Faramir. He ends up going into him and killing him. Nothing that I was too shocked by. But by this point, he was drawn into my army in such a way that I was able to, either whether I won the move or the priority, I was able to start kind of moving my army around his, which trapped the wraiths in the center, essentially. So instead of being able to do the thing where like he pops out black darts and runs away, at this point, they were all in the center, and I could slowly start to, if I win priority, I put a bodyguard onto one, keep him from casting, and just kind of hold on to the game that way. And that actually started going really well. I was winning a lot of priorities. I was winning a lot of move offs. I couldn't stop everything, and he was rolling fairly poorly with his black darts. So he would get them off every time, right? He'd roll 2 dice, roll the 5 or 6. Usually I wouldn't even bother to try to resist. And I'd be like, you know what, if you wound me, I'll rely on the fate roll, because rolling a 4+ is way better than rolling a 6+, right? And the game kind of went in that fashion for a good amount of time, where he'd throw some black darts. Eventually I was out of will. I still had 4 might. I was out of fate, but I wasn't yet wounded. But the important thing is that by this point, 2 wraiths were dehorsed. I think 1 or 2 were dead. And my whole army kind of pinned his in a very specific place. So he couldn't easily get to Boromir, whether it was by casting magic, because I can now hide him, or by trying to get into combat. Because if they get into combat, they shriek and they just kill him, right? It's a nasty army. I can't stop it. Eventually, one black dart kills his horse. But at this point, most of the wraiths are contained. 2 or 3 of them still have horses. The rest are on foot. It's coming down to time. Boromir at this point has taken a wound, but he is not dead, and I am not broken. And I realize, against all hope, like I am currently winning the scenario 2-1, right? Because Boromir has a banner. Even though he's wounded, he's a banner. And so all I need to do is keep Boromir from dying, and he still has 2 wounds, even though he has no will or fate left. And I just need to keep from breaking. So it comes down, the clock is down to like 3 minutes. It's like the last turn of the game, just by any metric. I lose priority. I call the move. He can't challenge because he's out of might on all of his wraiths at this point. And I move what I can, where I can. And what I was able to do with my remaining Fountain Court is at least pin the wraiths that had will left to cast Black Dart. So at that point, he can't cast magic at me. Boromir's safe. There's no way for him to get to Boromir and kill him, right? Unfortunately, I couldn't pin all of the wraiths because I didn't have bodyguard where I needed it everywhere. And at that point, I have to roll a 9 to go into a wraith, and it just wasn't possible. So the best I could do is surround them so that they couldn't break out, right? And so he takes his movement phase. 1 wraith charges into 2. 1 wraith charges into 2. There's nothing I could do about it. And I'm 4 for broken. So at this point, I'm winning unless he manages to roll 6 consecutive dice rolls in his favor. I've got 5/5. I've got the banner. Like, I'm feeling good about it. I've got D6 where I need it to. First combat, rolls the 6. Can't challenge. Kills 1 warrior. Minas Tirith kills the other one with each attack. Kills a warrior. Next combat, rolls the 6. Kills the ranger, breaks me, and wins the game on the very last roll again.
Ooh,
and I was like, no! Played so well. Like, there was no part of me that thought I should win, because if he was able to get into Boromir with 7 black darts a turn, I should have just been wiped instantly. I can't charge his army. Somehow, against all hope, I managed to position so well that I was within the striking distance of the unwinnable scenario. But even though his dice were perfectly average the whole game, on the very last turn, 6 consecutive dice rolls going his way. I'm broken. It ends with a victory to the Black Riders. So fair play. Can't do anything about that. If I was able to like get more wraiths into combat with single models, I would have, but like I couldn't, because can't roll 9s, right? It's hard to do. So awesome game, really, really fun. Really back and forth all the way to the end. Ended on an absolute nail biter. And even though that then put me on 2-1-3 into Mediocreville, it was a really great way to end the tournament for me. So again, a game that I'm very proud of the way I played. I don't think I made any major mistakes, right? It was just, I made the best of an uphill climb, and I almost climbed the hill, so to speak. So great game, great opponent. And that was my Articon.
Well done.
But what a draw to take on it to the death on the last round. Black Riders, when your 1 model is all your points, right? Like, just miserable draw.
Yeah, and yet you almost managed.
I had it. I could taste it. He just had to fail any one of those dice rolls, and it was mine. So
throughout most of your game, I was actually in the bar.
oh yeah.
so I had another highly uneventful round.
Yeah.
So by this time, I had played 17 games over 5 days, so I was done.
Mhm.
And so I got to play. I was on 3 wins and 2 draws, and I got to play. I think it was like table 9 or so against Tommaso Zerbi. Tommaso was actually on our podcast before. He's the guy from Italy.
Mhm.
He was second last year at Ardacon, and this year his army was almost identical last year. So it was Legolas leading some elves, and an army of Lake Town. So he had in excess of 50 models, and he had a banner. He had 56 models, in fact. He had a banner, and I didn't.
Mhm.
So I knew from the start I have to start moving forward. And he had like 21 bows plus Legolas. He started shooting at me from turn 1, and it just went bad. Like
Oh.
in like the first 2 he hit like 8. At that point, I was like, okay, I keep moving forward. And we play a game where most of my army dies and I get crushed.
Mhm.
I'm never gonna get the banner. I'm never gonna do anything about his leader. Even if I break him, he's gonna break me first. There's just no way I can win this.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, look, Tommaso, like from now on, this is the situation. You can clearly see that that's just how it's gonna go. So I'm just gonna start hiding, and I'm not gonna let you break me for the next like hour and a half, hour and 20.
Mhm.
So do you agree to a 2-0 win to you? It's like, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
As a banner, I don't.
Yeah,
All right,
it is
let's go
fair,
so.
right? Yeah.
So we left it at that. So yeah, my tournament ended with 3 wins, 2 draws, and a loss at the end.
Mhm.
And the thing is, if I brought a trebuchet, it would have been completely different world.
No,
Because
Well, if
thinking
you
of
had a
a,
trebuchet, I
I
would.
was about to say, I'm thinking of a different solution to this, Mick, one that costs 25 points and doesn't neuter the rest of your army.
yeah, but like
Um,
you pay 55 points more. It's just the cost of a bolt thrower extra over a banner, and you have a trebuchet. Takes out the banner, wrecks those rangers in the previous game. I don't even need an elven cloak. All I need is a trebuchet.
Mhm.
So yeah, had I done it, I would have won. Possibly, probably, maybe,
Mhm.
hopefully. But yeah, it ended up. So basically, my final day at Ardacon was, let's agree on a draw. Let's go away.
Yeah.
Let's agree on on you winning. Let's go away.
I mean, let's be real. That's exactly what it would have happened anyway, right? So
Yeah, like I would have gotten crushed, and I just couldn't really be bothered to
yeah,
play anymore anyway. So I was done.
yeah.
So yeah, we agreed on the result and went away to the bar.
Well,
But yeah,
ironically,
great
if
fun.
that was probably the one game in the whole tournament where I really wish I had Hurin, right? Because if I had Hurin, he would hide in the back corner. Boromir would go into the wraiths, and then they'd have to deal with him. And if he kills him, okay,
Yeah.
you don't get leader points, right? So
Yeah, I got to say, like throughout the entire tournament, Hurin or Faramir would have been exactly listening.
there is almost no situation in which Faramir would not have been equal or better as Hurin for me.
Yes.
so it was a net loss overall, but you know, he showed his
Well, yeah,
quality in one game, and that was the Easterling
I
game
still
where he
blame
refused to
Evan.
die,
Yeah,
even
I
though
still
I
blame
was an
Evan
idiot.
because of Witch King.
Yeah.
Had Evan not taken the Witch King, I would have taken him, and then you would have had Huron. So everybody wins.
So it's a cascade of failures, and it all
Yeah.
starts
so,
with Evan.
so
Thanks.
it's my fault. Is that what you're saying? Okay,
It is.
got it, got it.
Yeah. So to, just as a quick recap, so I mean, obviously my record in the end wasn't anything to write home about, but 3 of the games for me ended on the last dice roll, and had they gone literally any other way, that would have been 3 wins in my favor. So I'm very proud of all the games I played. Like there was, outside of that one real mess up with Faramir, not calling the heroic move, like I don't think I made any major mistakes. It was some of the best Lord of the Rings I've actually played, and I had really strong opponents. I don't know if the quality of the players at Articon this year was really high or what, but it was. But my opponents were all really strong. I had great games. Shout out to everyone I played for, there was not a single game where I was like, ugh, right, this person is awful or anything like that. So I had a really great time. And yeah, even though the record doesn't really show it, I actually felt very good about the way I performed and wouldn't take back any of the kind of decisions in game that I made. So
yeah, same.
Yeah,
like I ended up playing 18 rounds against 16 different opponents over the 5 days, and it was great.
Yeah, it's really good.
Every single game was really good, and players were nice. Everything was like really chilled, except the actual temperature.
Except the actual temperature. In the last game, we were in the back corner, and it was the one that was by the open window, and that almost made everything worth it because it would like blow in the breeze. Oh, it was the best. It was absolutely the best. So but yeah, so that's me. Obviously, thank you again to James and all of the team there for giving us such a great GT, and thanks to all my opponents for being awesome and giving me great games, and hopefully be back next year. So
yeah, no, for sure. An Unexpected podcast will be returning. And we will be returning with more episodes too, with more recaps of Articon.
Yes, we will. Yeah, so this is part 1 of at least 4, maybe more. We'll see how it goes. So the next episode should be Matt and Evan discussing their GT games. So stay tuned. And as always, thanks for tuning in and spending a couple hours listening to us.
Yeah. Take care.
Have a good one, guys.